Beneath the earth, hidden in shadows of time, lie questions humanity has never been able to answer. Ancient ruins, colossal monuments, and cryptic carvings whisper of civilizations that rose, flourished, and then vanished, leaving behind puzzles carved in stone and mysteries that defy explanation. From forgotten temples buried under shifting sands to massive structures aligned with the stars, the traces of our ancestors seem to hold secrets we are only beginning to uncover. What purpose did these wonders serve? Were they messages for the future, or echoes of knowledge we no longer understand? In the deserts of Egypt, the jungles of Central America, the valleys of Palestine, and the high peaks of Peru, silent relics stand as sentinels to the unknown, challenging the stories we've been told about human history. Tonight, we will journey across continents and through centuries, exploring unsolved archaeological enigmas that continue to perplex scientists, historians, and dreamers alike. So sit back, let your imagination roam across the ruins of time, and join us as we step into the world of mysteries buried just beneath the surface of history. Deep in the rolling hills of Zhejiang Province in eastern China lies a landscape that, at first glance, seems ordinary. Green fields, quiet villages, and small bodies of water that have been part of the scenery for generations. Yet beneath these waters, hidden for more than 2,000 years, lies one of the greatest enigmas in the history of archaeology: the Longyou Caves. Discovered in 1992 by local farmers, the caves were found when the villagers decided to drain one of the ponds that dotted the region. Expecting to find a shallow basin or natural depression, they instead revealed a vast, hand-carved chamber of stone. As more ponds were drained, more caves appeared. To this day, at least 24 of these immense subterranean halls have been uncovered, each one carved directly into the hard siltstone, and each one showing signs of extraordinary precision. The sheer scale of the Longyou Caves is staggering. Some chambers stretch over 30 meters high, with ceilings and walls meticulously sculpted into symmetrical forms. The surface of nearly every wall is marked with uniform, parallel lines, chiseling patterns so consistent and deliberate that they resemble brushstrokes across stone. Unlike natural caves, there are no stalactites, no irregular formations, no evidence that nature played any role in shaping them. Every angle, every corner, every surface speaks of human intention and craftsmanship. What makes the Longyou Caves truly baffling is not simply their size, but the questions they raise. Who created them? How were they built? And perhaps most importantly, why? Mainstream archaeology has attempted to frame the caves within the context of known Chinese history. Based on the style of the chisel marks, some scholars suggest they date back to the Qin dynasty, around 200 BC, or possibly even earlier. If true, this would mean that these caverns were carved at a time when most construction in the region was limited to wooden structures or smaller stoneworks. No written records exist describing their creation. No ancient texts, imperial documents, or local legends make mention of such monumental undertakings. For a civilization known for its meticulous record-keeping, the silence is extraordinary. Then there is the matter of labor. To hollow out a single chamber would have required removing hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of stone. Multiply that effort across 24 caves, and the figure becomes almost unimaginable. Some estimates suggest the equivalent of 1 million cubic meters of stone would have needed to be excavated, and yet no trace of this displaced material has ever been found. Where did it go? How was it transported? Equally puzzling is the engineering. The caves remain stable after more than 2 millennia, with no signs of collapse. Their ceilings and walls stand strong, defying time, erosion, and earthquakes that have shaken the region over the centuries. There is no evidence of supporting beams or reinforcements. The builders seem to have understood the geological properties of the stone with astonishing accuracy, ensuring that their creation would endure for millennia. Some researchers suggest that the caves might have served as storage chambers, or perhaps as shelters from war and conflict. Others believe they were ceremonial or religious spaces, carved to honor gods or ancestors. Yet the layout of the caves complicates these theories. They are not interconnected, but rather isolated from one another. Each chamber is distinct, as if the builders had no interest in creating a network but instead focused on individual masterpieces. The decorative patterns carved into the stone also raise questions. The parallel chisel marks cover every surface uniformly, even in places where no one would normally look, such as the highest parts of the ceilings. If the caves were purely utilitarian, why spend such effort on details that served no obvious function? Could the markings have had symbolic meaning, perhaps reflecting rituals or cosmological beliefs now lost to time? More speculative theories suggest that the Longyou caves were not built for humans at all. Some propose they could have been reservoirs or water control systems, though the design seems too elaborate for such a purpose. Others wonder if they might have been acoustic chambers, designed for sound or resonance in ways we no longer understand. Fringe perspectives push the mystery even further. A few have speculated that the caves could represent lost knowledge, remnants of a civilization far more advanced than we currently recognize in that period of history. Comparisons are sometimes drawn to other unexplained structures around the world: the megaliths of Peru, the underground cities of Cappadocia, or the enigmatic stoneworks scattered across Palestine and the Mediterranean. Could the Longyou caves be part of a broader pattern, a reminder that our understanding of the ancient world may only scratch the surface of a deeper story? Yet despite all these ideas, the caves remain silent. No artifacts have been recovered to shed light on their builders. No tools, no pottery, no inscriptions have been found in their depths. They are empty, vast halls of stone carved with unimaginable effort, but devoid of clues. Standing inside one of these caverns, the sense of mystery is overwhelming. The silence is profound, broken only by the sound of one's footsteps echoing off the walls, the precision of the chiseling, the immensity of the space, and the weight of time combine to create a feeling of awe and unease. You are in the presence of something undeniably human, yet utterly beyond explanation. Why were the Longyou caves created, and what purpose did they serve? Were they monuments to forgotten gods, shelters from a forgotten war, or testaments to a level of engineering we still do not fully understand? The questions remain suspended in the shadows of these ancient halls. And as with so many of the world's greatest mysteries, the Longyou caves remind us of how much we still do not know, how many stories remain untold, how many truths still lie hidden beneath the surface of history. From the silent stone chambers of China's Longyou caves, we now turn our gaze northward, to the boundless forests and frozen lakes of the Ural Mountains in Russia. Here, in a land shaped by glaciers and shrouded in mist for much of the year, one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the modern era was unearthed. It is not a temple, nor a pyramid, nor an ancient city, but something far more fragile and perhaps even more mysterious, a carved figure of wood, older than nearly any monument we know. The Shigir idol. Standing more than 17 feet tall in its original form, this statue was carved from larch wood and buried deep in a peat bog over 11,000 years ago. To put that into perspective, the Shigir idol is twice as old as the Egyptian pyramids and predates the great stone monuments of Stonehenge by over 6 millennia. It is the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world, a relic that has somehow survived the slow decay of time, preserved only by the unique conditions of the bog that entombed it. The first fragments were discovered in 1890, when workers digging for gold stumbled upon the remains. At first, few could comprehend the significance of what they had found. Over time, painstaking reconstruction revealed a towering figure with a human-like face, elongated proportions, and an intricate series of carvings that spiraled down its surface. Zigzags, chevrons, and enigmatic geometric shapes adorn its body, while 7 faces, some human, others more abstract, seem to gaze outward, watching across time. What do these markings mean? For archaeologists, the Shigir idol is a paradox. Its age alone challenges long-held assumptions about human culture in the early Holocene period. At the time of its creation, around 9000 BC, much of the human population lived as hunter-gatherers, without permanent settlements or large-scale agriculture. The prevailing view once held that complex symbolic art, especially monumental works, only emerged later with the rise of farming societies. And yet, here in the frozen forests of Eurasia, people carved a figure of staggering scale and symbolic depth. Some researchers believe the markings on the idol may represent a creation myth or cosmological map, a way for an ancient people to express their understanding of the world, the heavens, and the cycles of life and death. Others suggest the faces and patterns might mark clan lineages, ancestral spirits, or protective deities guarding the boundary between the living and the dead. The vertical arrangement of symbols, moving from the top of the statue to the bottom, could even hint at a narrative, a story read not in words, but in lines and shapes, passed down through generations. And yet, none of these theories can be proven. The Shigir idol resists easy classification. Its style does not neatly match other artifacts of the same period, and its survival as wood rather than stone makes it unique. Some argue that its patterns resemble those found on tools and ornaments of Mesolithic cultures across Eurasia, suggesting a shared symbolic language stretching across great distances. Others point to its sheer size and artistry as evidence of something more localized and intentional, a unique cultural achievement whose meaning is lost to us. But there are more speculative questions as well. Could the idol reflect contact with traditions or knowledge long forgotten? Was it a monument to gods, or perhaps something older, a relic of beliefs that predate the very foundations of civilization? Its abstract designs have led some to wonder if they encode messages, calendars, or maps, though no consensus exists on what they might reveal. The very act of creating such a statue poses its own mystery. Why would a nomadic or semi-nomadic society devote immense time and resources to carving a monumental figure from a single larch tree? What drove them to preserve their vision not in small carvings or cave art, but in a towering idol that must have dominated the landscape? Was it meant to inspire awe, to terrify, to teach? And then, why bury it? The idol's preservation is thanks to its burial in the peat bog, where the oxygen-poor conditions protected it from decay. But whether this burial was intentional or accidental remains unknown. Did the ancient carvers place it there as part of a ritual? Was it hidden away, meant to rest undisturbed? Or did the bog simply reclaim it, swallowing it as centuries passed? The Shigir idol forces us to confront the gaps in our understanding of prehistory. It suggests that the people of 9000 BC were capable of far more than we once assumed. Complex thought, symbolic representation, and perhaps even organized spiritual systems. If such a masterpiece could be created in the Ural Mountains, what else might have existed, now lost to time, wood, and weather? Some researchers see in the idol a challenge to the neat timelines of human development, a reminder that art, symbolism, and belief may have blossomed independently, in many places, far earlier than conventional history suggests. Others entertain more fringe ideas, that the idol could be a remnant of a lost culture, a forgotten chapter in humanity's story, one erased by the floods, climate shifts, and upheavals of the early Holocene. Standing before it today, reconstructed and displayed in the Sverdlovsk Regional Museum, one cannot help but feel a sense of unease. The eyes carved into its weathered surface seem to follow, to watch, as if carrying with them an ancient intelligence. The patterns, etched so deliberately, speak a language no one can read. Is it a sacred text, a myth preserved in wood, or something else entirely, something we may never fully grasp? The Shigir idol remains, like so many of history's greatest enigmas, a question carved into time itself. It invites us to look deeper, to wonder about what lies beyond the edges of our knowledge, and to consider how much of the human past remains hidden, waiting perhaps beneath the earth, or in the forgotten silence of the world's most ancient places. From the frozen forests of the Ural Mountains and the haunting gaze of the Shigir idol, our journey now carries us across the Pacific Ocean, to one of the most remote and enigmatic places on Earth. A solitary island adrift in the vastness of the sea, known to its inhabitants as Rapa Nui. Most visitors recognize Easter Island for its towering moai statues, those colossal stone faces staring silently toward the horizon. Yet beneath the gaze of these giants lies another mystery, one that may hold the key to unlocking the island's forgotten past. Scattered among the relics of the Rapa Nui people are wooden tablets, small in size but immeasurable in importance, inscribed with a system of writing so unique, so baffling that it has resisted decipherment for more than a century. These are the Rongorongo tablets. At first glance, they appear almost modest, wooden planks, palm-sized or slightly larger, their surfaces etched with rows of tiny figures. But look closer, and the carvings reveal themselves as something extraordinary. Stylized human forms, birds, fish, plants, and geometric shapes arranged in precise sequences, flowing across the surface like a language waiting to be read. Unlike the moai, which dominate the island's landscape, the Rongorongo tablets whisper their mystery in miniature, their power contained not in size, but in meaning. What sets the script apart is not only its beauty, but its singularity. Rongorongo is one of the few known written languages to have developed in complete isolation. Unlike scripts influenced by Egypt, Mesopotamia, or China, this one emerged on a tiny island thousands of miles from any major civilization, and yet it follows rules that suggest a fully developed writing system capable of recording speech, thought, or ritual. When European missionaries first encountered the tablets in the 19th century, they recognized at once their potential significance. Some even suggested that if deciphered, they could reveal the lost history of Rapa Nui, accounts of the people's origins, their religious practices, perhaps even the story of how and why the Great Moai were built. But almost as soon as they were discovered, most of the tablets vanished. Many were burned, destroyed, or carried away, leaving only a few dozen scattered in museums across the world. Today, fewer than 30 examples survive. The mystery deepens when one considers the method of reading. Rongorongo is written in a system called reverse boustrophodon. This means that one line is read left to right, the next right to left, with the characters rotated accordingly, like a mirror reflection. Such a structure is rare, and it suggests a sophisticated tradition of scribes who not only carved the symbols, but also taught the precise manner in which they were to be read. Yet, the meaning of the script remains elusive. Despite more than a century of study, no one has been able to provide a definitive translation. Some linguists argue that Rongorongo represents a full written language, encoding speech in the same way as Egyptian hieroglyphs or Sumerian cuneiform. Others believe it may have functioned as proto-writing, symbolic shorthand used for ritual or memory, but not capable of recording language in detail. Still others propose that the script may encode chants, genealogies, or cosmological cycles, knowledge passed down in secret among the island's priestly class. What we do know is tantalizing. Certain symbols repeat in patterns that suggest structure, perhaps grammar. Some sequences seem to align with astronomical events, hinting at the possibility that the tablets were used as calendars. Others appear connected to the island's rich mythology, where birds, fish, and human figures played central roles in creation stories and ritual practices. And yet, the truth remains locked away. Without a bilingual key, something akin to the Rosetta Stone, scholars may never know for certain what the tablets say. The spoken language of the Rapa Nui has shifted and eroded over centuries, leaving no clear bridge to the symbols carved in wood. It is here that speculation begins to widen. Some see in the Rongorongo script evidence of a lost chapter of human history, a reminder that even in extreme isolation, complex systems of communication and symbolism could flourish. Others wonder if the tablets preserve knowledge of events that reshaped the island, the ecological collapse, the deforestation, or the social upheavals that left the Moai abandoned and toppled. Could they be warnings, records of catastrophe, or perhaps prayers meant to preserve balance between the human and the divine? More fringe theories suggest even greater mysteries. Was Rongorongo connected, however faintly, to distant cultures across the Pacific or beyond? Could there have been contact between the people of Rapa Nui and those of South America, or other seafaring societies now forgotten? Some point to similarities in myth and iconography, though no firm evidence has ever been found. Others, more boldly, wonder whether the tablets encode not just human history, but knowledge passed down from a time before recorded civilization, an inheritance from an unknown source. Yet standing before one of the surviving tablets, housed today in museums far from its island home, speculation gives way to silence. The symbols, carved with such care, remain mute. Their message, once clear to the people who carved them, has been erased by time, leaving only fragments and echoes. And perhaps that is what makes the Rongorongo tablets so haunting. They represent both presence and absence, the tangible survival of a people's voice and the simultaneous loss of what that voice was trying to say. What truths lie hidden in those delicate carvings? Were they histories, myths, or warnings meant for future generations? Or are they something we cannot even yet imagine? The mystery endures, unbroken, carved into wood that has outlasted empires and civilizations. The tablets remain silent and watchful, inviting us to listen closely to a language we no longer understand, and to wonder what other messages, lost to time, still lie buried in the uncharted corners of human history. From the distant shores of Rapa Nui, where symbols etched into wooden tablets guard their secrets, our path now carries us back across continents, into the heart of Europe, to a quiet hill in central Germany. It was here, buried beneath the soil of the Mittelberg, near the town of Nebra, that a disc of bronze and gold was unearthed. At first, it appeared to be little more than an ancient ornament, corroded and weathered by time. But as the dirt fell away and its design came into view, archaeologists realized they were looking at something extraordinary. The Nebra sky disk. Roughly 12 inches across, circular and dark green with age, the disk is inlaid with delicate sheets of gold. On its surface, a scattering of golden circles forms what appears to be a cluster of stars. A larger circle, glowing like the sun, or perhaps the full moon, anchors the design, while a crescent, thin and sharp, recalls the phases of the lunar cycle. Two golden arcs frame the sides of the disk, as if marking horizons or the passage of the seasons. Later additions include a narrow band at the bottom, interpreted by some as a boat, perhaps ferrying the sun across the heavens. It is one of the most enigmatic artifacts ever found in Europe. Dated to around 1600 BC, the Nebra sky disk belongs to the Bronze Age, a time when societies in Central Europe were still considered prehistoric, without formal writing systems or monumental architecture on the scale of Egypt or Mesopotamia. And yet, here is a finely crafted object that appears to depict the cosmos itself. The implications are staggering. If the disk indeed represents the sky, then it may be the world's oldest known map of the heavens. Some scholars argue that the cluster of 7 dots on its surface corresponds to the Pleiades, a constellation that has held significance for cultures across the globe, from Mesopotamian mythologies to Native American traditions. The arcs at the sides may align with the solstices, marking the sun's path from its rising point in summer to its setting in winter. In this interpretation, the Nebra sky disk would have been both a symbolic object and a practical tool, a portable guide to the rhythms of the sun, moon, and stars. But was it really an astronomical instrument, or something else entirely? Mainstream archaeology sees it as evidence that Bronze Age peoples in Central Europe had far more advanced astronomical knowledge than previously believed. The disk suggests an awareness of celestial cycles, of timekeeping, and perhaps of ritual practices tied to the heavens. It may have been used by an elite group, chieftains, shamans, or priests, who controlled not only earthly resources, but also access to the mysteries of the sky. Yet other interpretations cast the artifact in a different light. Some suggest it was less a scientific tool and more a sacred object, part of a religious system in which the sun and moon were venerated as divine beings. In this view, the arcs and boat are not measurements of time, but symbols of cosmic order, of journeys across the celestial sea. Still others wonder if the disk represents something even more abstract, a merging of myth, ritual, and observation. Was it a codex of the sky, encoding both the practical knowledge of solstices and the spiritual narratives that gave meaning to life and death? The debate is intensified by the circumstances of its discovery. The Nebra sky disk was not found in a controlled excavation, but by looters in 1999, who stumbled upon it with metal detectors and attempted to sell it on the black market. When the artifact was finally recovered by authorities, it had already been uprooted from its context, leaving scholars with only fragments of information about its original placement. Was it buried as an offering, deliberately hidden, or simply lost? Without those details, interpretation becomes even more elusive. And then there are the fringe theories. Some have suggested that the disk's sophistication points to knowledge imported from elsewhere, perhaps from the advanced civilizations of the Near East, where astronomy had already flourished for millennia. Could traders, travelers, or wanderers have carried such knowledge into Europe, leaving behind this golden relic as evidence of forgotten contact? Others speculate more boldly still, seeing in the disk echoes of a lost civilization or a remnant of wisdom passed down from an age before recorded history. The object itself resists simplification. Its gold inlays gleam even today, thousands of years after they were hammered into place. The stars are arranged with purpose, though their exact meaning remains disputed. The arcs and bands suggest function, but one can never be certain. It is an artifact that stands on the edge between science and spirituality, between what we know and what we can only guess. To stand before the Nebra sky disk is to confront the ingenuity of our ancestors and the vastness of what we still do not understand. How did Bronze Age people, without telescopes or written records, capture the cosmos in a single compact image? What rituals or beliefs were tied to this gleaming object? And why, after all the effort to create it, was it placed in the earth as if meant to be hidden for thousands of years? The Nebra sky disk reminds us that the story of human history is far from complete. It challenges our timelines, reshapes our assumptions, and suggests that even in times we call prehistoric, people may have gazed at the stars with knowledge and meaning we have yet to recover. What truths are still written in its golden symbols? What stories did its makers tell under the night sky, stories now lost to silence? And as we peer into its dark surface, are we glimpsing only a fragment of a larger tradition, one that may still lie buried, waiting to be found? From the golden symbols of the Nebra sky disk, which gazed upward to the heavens, we now move southward, across Europe and into the heart of the Mediterranean. Here, on the island of Crete, amid the ruins of the ancient Minoan civilization, another enigma lies waiting. Unlike the celestial bronze of Nebra, this mystery is pressed into clay, a fragile disk, inscribed with symbols so unusual, so singular, that scholars have debated its meaning for over a century. The Phaistos disk. Discovered in 1908 by the Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier, the disk was unearthed within the ruins of the Minoan palace at Phaistos, on Crete's southern plain. About 6 inches across, baked from clay and carefully preserved, the object may appear modest in size, yet its surface is covered with symbols unlike anything else from the ancient Mediterranean world. Arranged in a spiral, running from the outer edge to the center, are 242 impressions made with 45 distinct characters. At first glance, the symbols seem to belong to a language, a series of men, animals, tools, plants, and abstract designs pressed into the clay with small carved stamps. This alone is striking. The disk is the earliest known artifact created using movable type, long before Gutenberg's printing press revolutionized Europe. Each sign was stamped, not carved, suggesting a deliberate and systematic method. But a method for what? The Phaistos disk is dated to roughly 1700 BC, placing it in the middle of the Bronze Age. This was the height of Minoan civilization, a society known for its grand palaces, sophisticated art, and complex trade networks. The Minoans had their own writing systems, Linear A and later Linear B. Yet the signs on the Phaistos disk do not correspond to either, nor do they match any known script from neighboring cultures in Egypt, Mesopotamia, or the Aegean. They stand alone, a script without a family. For decades, scholars have sought to decipher the disk, but without success. The problem is not just the unfamiliar symbols, but the fact that the disk is unique. No other examples of this script have ever been found. With no bilingual inscriptions, no extended texts for comparison, the disk resists translation. It is, in essence, a closed book. Still, theories abound. Some believe the disk records a hymn or prayer, meant for ritual use in the palace or temple. The spiral arrangement may echo chants sung as a continuous cycle, winding inward to the heart of the sacred. Others see it as a calendar, its symbols marking cycles of time, harvests, lunar phases, or the turning of the seasons. Still others argue for a more practical use, an inventory of goods, a legal document, or a record of treaties and trade. But not all theories remain within the realm of the ordinary. Some suggest the disk encodes a lost language, unrelated to Indo-European or Semitic traditions, a voice from a culture otherwise erased from history. Others go further, speculating that the disk represents a message of great importance, hidden away at Phaistos for reasons we can only guess. Was it the work of a single scribe, experimenting with a new form of writing, or a sacred relic, its meaning known only to a small group of initiates? The spiral itself adds to the sense of mystery. Unlike most scripts, which are written in straight lines, the Phaistos disk turns inward, as if guiding the reader on a journey from the outside world into the center. Does this arrangement reflect more than aesthetic choice? Was it symbolic, a path toward enlightenment, or a ritual act of reading itself? Even more puzzling is the absence of other discs. If the stamping method was practical and efficient, why was it not repeated? Why has no second example ever been found, on Crete or elsewhere? Was this disc an experiment that failed to spread, or was it deliberately kept secret? Some fringe interpretations step beyond conventional scholarship. A few propose that the disk could be evidence of contact with distant civilizations, its script representing an otherwise unknown tradition brought to Crete through trade or migration. Others view it as a remnant of a much older knowledge, an inheritance from a forgotten culture that vanished long before the rise of the Minoans. Yet for all these theories, the disk remains silent. To hold it, or to stand before it today in the Heraclean Archaeological Museum, is to confront the limits of what we can know. The clay carries the marks of human hands, the impressions of carved stamps, the deliberate choices of an ancient mind, and yet the meaning of those choices is gone, leaving behind a text without a reader. One cannot help but wonder, what if the Phaistos disk does hold a story, a hymn, or a message? What if it preserves a myth of creation, a plea to the gods, or a record of journeys across the sea? How much of the Minoan world, its beliefs, its language, its history, remains hidden within those spirals? The Phaistos disk reminds us of how fragile knowledge can be. A society that built palaces and carved art of astonishing beauty could also create a script that, once lost, leaves us only with questions. It is a relic that exists on the threshold, between communication and silence, between history and mystery. And so the spiral continues to draw us inward, pulling us toward its center, inviting us to imagine what words, what songs, what secrets might still be waiting to be uncovered. From the spiraling symbols pressed into clay at Phaistos, we now journey eastward, across mountains, deserts, and rivers, into the fertile plains of Sichuan in southwestern China. Here, buried beneath the soil for more than 3 millennia, another enigma awaited discovery, one that would challenge long-held assumptions about the origins of Chinese civilization. Sanxingdui. In the 1920s, a farmer digging a ditch near the small village of Sanxingdui unearthed fragments of jade and pottery. At the time, the discovery was noted but not pursued. It was not until 1986, when archaeologists opened 2 massive sacrificial pits at the site, that the true scale of the mystery was revealed. Within these pits lay thousands of artifacts, bronze trees, gold masks, ivory tusks, jade blades, and, most astonishing of all, enormous bronze masks with haunting, exaggerated features. These masks, some with wide, staring eyes, sharp noses, and mouths frozen in an almost otherworldly expression, seem to belong to no known tradition. Some are larger than a human head, suggesting they were never meant to be worn. Others are adorned with intricate headdresses, curling horns, and stylized patterns. Their gaze is unblinking, almost eternal, as if staring out from another time or another world. Archaeologists date the Sanxingdui site to around 1200 BC, contemporary with the late Shang dynasty in central China. Yet the artifacts bear little resemblance to Shang art. The Shang were known for their bronzeware, ritual vessels cast with symmetrical patterns and animal motifs. The Sanxingdui bronzes, by contrast, are bold, strange, and unique. Their masks are unlike anything else in the archaeological record. This raises a question: who created them? The discovery revealed evidence of an advanced and previously unknown culture, now referred to as the Sanxingdui civilization. They had mastered bronze casting techniques on a scale that rivaled and in some ways surpassed their Shang contemporaries. Their masks and statues were not only technically sophisticated, but symbolically complex. And yet, beyond the artifacts, little is known. No written records have survived. The people of Sanxingdui remain nameless, their beliefs, language, and stories lost to time. Some scholars suggest that the masks represent gods or spirits worshipped by the Sanxingdui people. The enlarged eyes may symbolize the power of vision, of seeing beyond the ordinary world. The protruding ears could signify heightened awareness, the ability to hear the voices of the divine. The masks, then, may have been used in rituals, perhaps mounted on wooden frames, costumes, or even giant statues. But the purpose of the pits themselves is also unclear. Why were such extraordinary objects buried, deliberately broken and burned before being placed underground? Were they offerings, sacrifices to appease gods or ancestors? Or was this an act of closure, marking the end of a sacred era? The questions deepen when we consider the scale of what was buried. Over a ton of elephant tusks, massive bronze works, and exquisite jades, all discarded into the earth. Such wealth and artistry suggest a powerful society, yet one that chose to erase itself in mystery. The discovery of Sanxingdui has challenged the traditional view that Chinese civilization began solely along the Yellow River. Instead, it suggests a more complex picture, in which multiple centers of culture and innovation rose and flourished, sometimes in isolation, sometimes in contact with one another. The Sanxingdui people, it seems, were not an offshoot of the Shang, but an entirely separate civilization with its own vision of the world. And yet, their sudden disappearance is as puzzling as their masks. Around 1000 BC, the Sanxingdui site appears to have been abandoned. No great war or destruction has been uncovered. Instead, it is as if the people simply vanished. Later settlements in the region, such as Jinsha, suggest that some continuity may have remained, but the distinctive artistic style of Sanxingdui disappeared, never to return. What happened to this culture? Did environmental changes force them to migrate? Did flooding of the Min River disrupt their way of life? Or was there a deeper, less visible transformation, one that shifted their spiritual and political center elsewhere? Beyond mainstream archaeology, more speculative theories have flourished. Some see in the masks evidence of contact with distant cultures. The exaggerated eyes, some claim, resemble those of Mesopotamian figures, raising questions of ancient connections across continents. Others have gone further, suggesting that the masks depict beings not of this world, interpreted by some as stylized portrayals of gods, by others as possible representations of extraterrestrials. Of course, such ideas lie outside the evidence. Yet the strangeness of the masks, their scale, their otherworldly features, invites such speculation. When one stands before them in the Sichuan Museum today, it is hard not to feel the weight of mystery pressing from their unblinking eyes. Who or what were they meant to portray? Perhaps the masks are mirrors, reflecting not the faces of gods, but the imagination of a people who sought to bridge the human and the divine. Perhaps they were meant to embody the very act of transformation, of becoming something beyond oneself in ritual. Or perhaps they conceal stories now beyond our reach, myths and memories that vanished with the Sanxingdui people themselves. The silence of Sanxingdui is profound. We see their brilliance in bronze and gold, but not their words, their songs, their voices. We see their artistry, but not the lives that inspired it. In this way, the masks stand as guardians of a secret, witnesses to a story half told. And so the eyes of Sanxingdui continue to watch us, eyes that have stared across 3,000 years, unblinking, mysterious, unreadable. They remind us how much of the past remains hidden and how many chapters of human history lie buried, waiting to be uncovered. What else, we must wonder, still rests beneath the soil of Sichuan or in other forgotten corners of the world, waiting for the day when the earth once again reveals its secrets? From the bronze masks of Sanxingdui, their wide eyes staring into eternity, we travel further west, high into the remote and rugged landscapes where China meets Tibet. Here, among snow-dusted peaks and barren plateaus, whispers of another enigma emerge. A mystery not forged in gold or bronze, but carved in stone. The Bayan Karaula Mountains, an isolated range lying along the edge of the Tibetan Plateau, are as forbidding as they are desolate. Sparse vegetation clings to steep slopes. Valleys are often hidden in mist, and the silence of altitude is broken only by the wind. It was in this inhospitable terrain, the story goes, that an expedition in 1938 stumbled upon something entirely unexpected. Led by Chinese archaeologist Chipu Te, the team was said to have discovered a series of caves filled with strange burial sites. Inside, they found skeletons of small stature with disproportionately large skulls. But it was not only the skeletons that intrigued them, it was what lay beside them. Flat, circular stone discs, about a foot in diameter, each with a hole at its center, like ancient phonograph records. When examined more closely, the stones revealed a far stranger detail. Spiraling grooves etched into their surface, running from the center hole outward. At first glance, they resembled primitive decorations, but under magnification, some claimed the grooves were not mere markings at all, but minuscule characters, writing so tiny it required specialized study to decipher. These became known as the Dropa stones. According to later reports, over 700 such discs were recovered from the caves. They were dated, though without definitive proof, to around 10,000 BC, an era when the world's first great civilizations had not yet risen. If authentic, they would be among the oldest human artifacts ever recorded, but the true enigma lay not in their age, but in their alleged inscriptions. Scholars who claimed to have translated the characters reported an astonishing tale. The texts supposedly described a people, the Dropa, who had descended from the sky in a spacecraft. Their craft had crashed in these mountains, stranding them far from their home. Shunned by local tribes for their unusual appearance, the Dropa were said to have adapted to life in the inhospitable valleys, intermarrying with nearby peoples and leaving behind both their skeletal remains and their carved records. It is a story that blurs the boundary between archaeology and legend. Could a people from the stars have once walked the high plateaus of Tibet? Or were these inscriptions simply misunderstood, their meaning distorted by wishful thinking and misreporting? Mainstream archaeologists have long been skeptical. The original reports of Chipu Te's expedition are difficult to verify, and many of the alleged translations of the Dropa script trace back to secondary or even tertiary sources. Some suggest that the stones may indeed exist, but that their grooves are purely decorative, or perhaps a rudimentary attempt at symbolism by an early culture in the region. Yet the mystery persists, in part because the story refuses to disappear. In the 1960s, Soviet researchers claimed to have examined some of the discs. They reported that when tested, the stones exhibited unusual properties, a high concentration of cobalt and other metals, and a tendency to vibrate when placed on a specialized turntable, as though they carried an electrical charge. Such claims, too, remain difficult to confirm. Skeptics point out that no verifiable Dropa stones are known to exist in museum collections today. Photographs have surfaced over the decades, grainy images of circular discs with spiral grooves, but their provenance is uncertain. Were they authentic records of an ancient unknown culture, or modern fabrications feeding into a growing fascination with lost civilizations and extraterrestrial contact? And what of the Dropa themselves? Local legends do speak of small, unusual peoples dwelling in the mountains, though the lines between folklore, myth, and history are often blurred in such remote regions. Some anthropologists suggest these tales may reflect memories of isolated tribes, physically distinct due to genetic drift or adaptation to harsh environments. Others argue that such legends, combined with the discovery of unusual skeletal remains, could have inspired more imaginative retellings. The idea of beings descending from the sky is not unique to Tibet. Across the world, myths describe gods or strangers arriving from above, often bringing knowledge or technology. From the Sumerians of Mesopotamia to the Dogon of Africa, such stories echo through time. Are they purely symbolic, a way for ancient peoples to explain the unknown? Or do they preserve distant memories of encounters we have yet to fully understand? The Dropa stones sit at the crossroads of these questions. They could represent one of the earliest known attempts at record-keeping. Spirals carved into stone to mark events, rituals, or cosmological beliefs. Or they could be nothing more than curiosities, their mystery amplified by incomplete evidence and speculative retellings. And yet, the sheer persistence of the tale, retold again and again over the decades, suggests that something about these stones continues to compel the human imagination. If we strip away the more extraordinary claims, the image still lingers. Hundreds of carved discs, lying buried beside strange skeletons in a cave high in the Tibetan mountains. Why were they placed there? What purpose did they serve? Were they symbols of a forgotten ritual or markers of a migration? A people who journeyed into one of the harshest environments on Earth. And if the translations, however controversial, contain even a fragment of truth, what then? Were they simply myths etched into stone, stories of origins told in the only medium available to a prehistoric people? Or do they point to something more, an encounter that left a permanent mark on memory and tradition, passed down in the grooves of ancient discs? The mountains of Tibet hold their secrets well. Remote, windswept, and often inaccessible, they remind us how much of the past remains beyond our grasp. The Dropa stones, whether authentic or legend, invite us to look deeper, not just into the earth, but into the ways we interpret what we find. For now, the stones remain elusive, their supposed inscriptions unreadable, their origins uncertain, their meaning unresolved. But perhaps that is their greatest power. Not in the answers they provide, but in the questions they leave behind. What if the caves of Bayan Karaula still hold secrets waiting to be uncovered? What other forgotten records lie beneath the earth, their spirals etched not in ink or parchment, but in the enduring silence of stone? Beneath the bustling streets of Paola, a modest town on the island of Malta, lies a hidden world carved from stone. At first glance, nothing in the modern landscape reveals its presence. Yet, just a few steps below the surface, one enters a labyrinth that seems older than memory itself, a place where silence is as thick as the rock that surrounds it. This is the Hypogeum of Ħal-Saflieni, a subterranean sanctuary and necropolis that has baffled archaeologists for more than a century. Discovered by accident in 1902 during construction work, the Hypogeum revealed chambers and passageways hewn with astonishing precision. The site extends 3 levels deep, descending some 30 feet underground. Each level is composed of winding corridors, carved pillars, and domed chambers that echo with an uncanny stillness. To walk here is to step back into a world that predates recorded history. The structure is generally dated to around 4000 to 2500 BC, placing it among the earliest known underground temples anywhere in the world. Some chambers seem designed for ritual, with walls smoothed and painted in red ochre spirals, abstract motifs that suggest symbolic or cosmological meaning. Others appear to have been used for burials, with the remains of thousands of individuals once interred here. The Hypogeum is not merely a tomb. It is a vast subterranean complex that blurs the line between the sacred and the sepulchral. One chamber in particular has drawn intense fascination, the so-called oracle room. Its smooth, curved walls seem engineered for acoustics. A simple human voice spoken here resonates throughout the chamber, producing low frequencies that ripple through the body and can be felt as much as heard. Experiments have shown that these vibrations may induce altered states of consciousness, even influencing brainwave activity. Was this deliberate design, a form of prehistoric sound technology meant to enhance ritual, or a coincidence born of geology? The deeper one explores, the stranger the Hypogeum becomes. Archaeologists discovered miniature chambers that appear almost too small for human use, niches and passages carved with inexplicable precision, and evidence that the builders possessed not only advanced engineering skills, but also a deep understanding of their environment. Yet there are questions that resist easy answers. How did Neolithic people, lacking metal tools or advanced machinery, carve so extensively into the limestone bedrock? Why go to such extraordinary lengths to create a sanctuary underground when the island's surface offered abundant space for temples and monuments? And then there are the bones. Thousands of skeletal remains were once housed within the Hypogeum, but many of them have since disappeared. Early excavation records mention elongated skulls, human but with cranial proportions that seemed unusual. Were these natural genetic variations? The result of deliberate cranial modification, as seen in other ancient cultures? Or something else entirely? The skulls were sent to museums for study, but many vanished in the decades that followed. A few remain, but the controversy lingers, feeding speculation that they represent a chapter of human history we do not yet understand. Some theories suggest that Malta's Hypogeum was part of a wider prehistoric network, linked to the island's megalithic temples, such as Hagar Chim and Monajdra. These surface structures, aligned with celestial events, demonstrate a sophisticated grasp of astronomy. Could the Hypogeum have been a subterranean counterpart, a hidden temple for rituals connected to the cycles of the heavens? Others go further. The Hypogeum's mysterious acoustics have led some to propose that it was designed as a resonance chamber, amplifying frequencies to produce trance states or to communicate with forces beyond the human realm. Modern researchers experimenting with sound in the oracle room report sensations of disorientation, heightened perception, even visions. Were these chambers intended to bridge the gap between the living and the dead, or between the human and the divine? More speculative still are theories that the Hypogeum connects to legends of lost civilizations. Malta's location at the center of the Mediterranean has long invited speculation about its role in prehistory. Was it once a refuge after great floods swept across the ancient world? Could the Hypogeum, with its spiraling motifs and subterranean design, preserve echoes of a culture older than we imagine? Perhaps one erased by catastrophe? Legends persist among locals of underground tunnels stretching far beyond Paula, connecting distant parts of the island. Some say that entire areas of the Hypogeum remain sealed, too unstable or dangerous to explore. Others whisper of excavators who ventured into hidden passages and never returned. Such tales may be folklore, woven from the aura of mystery that clings to the site. Yet they leave open unsettling questions. How much of the Hypogeum remains undiscovered? And what might still lie hidden in its depths? Archaeology, at its best, balances evidence with imagination. What we know of the Hypogeum is already extraordinary, a prehistoric monument carved into living rock, where sound itself becomes part of the architecture, and where thousands of ancestors were laid to rest in carefully arranged chambers. What we do not know, the purpose of its design, the truth behind the vanished skulls, the extent of its tunnels, keeps the mystery alive. Standing in the oracle room, the silence presses close, broken only by a single word, a single breath. The sound lingers, vibrating through walls carved 5 millennia ago. Who first stood here, speaking to the stone? What stories did their voices carry? And what compelled them to carve a sanctuary beneath the earth, where darkness, sound, and silence converge into something that still defies explanation? For now, the Hypogeum of Ħal-Saflieni remains both a marvel of human ingenuity and a riddle left unanswered. Perhaps its true purpose lies forever buried beneath its limestone walls. Or perhaps, in time, the earth will yield more of its secrets. But one cannot help but wonder, if this vast underground labyrinth could remain hidden for thousands of years, what other worlds might still sleep beneath our feet, waiting to be found? Across the windswept plains of southern Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers once gave birth to some of humanity's earliest civilizations, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that defy easy explanation. The soil here has yielded pottery, tools, and remains of temples from the Ubaid period, an era that flourished between 6500 and 3800 BC, long before the rise of Sumer. But among these discoveries lies something far stranger. Small clay figurines, crafted with care thousands of years ago, depicting not humans but beings with long, slender bodies, elongated heads, and reptilian features. These are known today as the Ubaid lizard figurines. Unearthed primarily in sites such as Al-Ubaid, Eridu, and Ur, they stand no taller than a few inches, yet their presence looms large in archaeological debates. Some figurines appear to be female, with clearly modeled breasts and hips, sometimes holding a child. Others are male, armed with staffs or seated in commanding postures. What unites them is the unmistakable head, elongated, flattened, with large oval eyes and pointed snouts. The resemblance to lizards, or perhaps snakes, is striking. At first glance, one might assume these are stylized representations of local wildlife. After all, reptiles were common in the marshlands and deserts of Mesopotamia. Yet the more one studies these figurines, the more deliberate their design appears. The lizard-like features are not peripheral details, they are central to the figure's identity. Why would a culture, otherwise known for its practical pottery and functional artifacts, invest time in creating such otherworldly representations? Archaeologists generally approach the question with caution. Some propose that these figurines may have had a ritual function, representing deities or mythological beings associated with fertility, water, or protection. Others suggest they may have been talismans, objects of household devotion, or symbols in ceremonies whose meanings are now lost to us. Yet none of these explanations fully resolve the mystery. Unlike the more familiar gods of later Mesopotamian pantheons, figures with wings, crowns, and human-animal hybrids, these lizard beings stand apart, occupying a unique and unexplained niche in prehistoric symbolism. The details only deepen the intrigue. A few figurines depict what appears to be nurturing behavior, female figures nursing or cradling infants, but the infants themselves also display reptilian heads. Are these depictions of mythological offspring? Or do they suggest that the lizard-like figures were imagined as a distinct race of beings, capable of family life much like humans? The Ubaid culture, advanced for its time, laid many of the foundations upon which later Mesopotamian civilizations would rise. They developed irrigation systems that turned marshy floodplains into fertile farmland. They built communal temples, some of the earliest known in the region, suggesting a complex social and religious structure. And yet, amid this practical ingenuity, they produced figurines that remain baffling to this day. What role did these enigmatic objects play in their society? As with many ancient mysteries, the absence of definitive answers invites speculation. Some scholars have looked to myth. In Mesopotamian stories written down millennia later, serpents and dragons often appear as symbols of chaos or guardians of sacred knowledge. Could the Ubaid figurines represent an earlier, ancestral form of these myths, a precursor to the serpent deities of later Mesopotamian lore? Others see a link to fertility cults. Reptiles, with their ability to shed their skin, were often associated with regeneration and renewal, Perhaps the figurines were connected to rituals of life, death, and rebirth, serving as symbolic guardians of agricultural cycles. And then there are theories that push far beyond conventional archaeology. Some fringe interpretations suggest the figurines could represent memories, or even encounters, with non-human beings. Their reptilian features have led a few to connect them with myths of serpent-like deities, or even with modern notions of reptilian entities described in speculative literature. While mainstream archaeology does not support such claims, their persistence reflects the profound sense of mystery the figurines inspire. What makes the debate especially compelling is the absence of written records. The Ubaid culture predates cuneiform writing by centuries, leaving us no texts, no myths, no explanations in their own words. The figurines must therefore speak for themselves, their meaning locked in clay. And in their silence, they provoke questions more unsettling than answers. Why were these figures made in such consistent forms across multiple sites? Why emphasize lizard-like traits so deliberately? Were they representations of gods, mythological ancestors, or something more literal in the imagination of the Ubaid people? Even within archaeology, some details fuel curiosity. The craftsmanship of the figurines suggests they were not crude toys or casual works. Their presence in temples and ceremonial contexts indicates significance, yet no other artifacts from the period carry similar imagery. They stand isolated, a phenomenon without clear precedent or continuation. By the time the Ubaid culture gave way to early Sumerian society, the lizard figures disappear, as though they belonged only to one fleeting chapter of human history. The marshlands of southern Mesopotamia are a landscape of transition, where water meets desert, where survival depends on both engineering and adaptation. Perhaps the figurines reflect this environment, embodying creatures of both earth and water. Or perhaps they represent something entirely outside the natural world, something that cannot be so neatly categorized. Today, the lizard figurines reside in museum collections, fragile guardians of secrets carried across more than 6,000 years. To stand before them is to feel a quiet unease. Their unblinking eyes, their alien faces, their strangely human gestures, all combine to create an impression that transcends simple symbolism. Were the Ubaid lizard figurines echoes of myth, embodiments of fertility and regeneration, or windows into beliefs we can scarcely imagine? Without texts, we cannot know for certain. What remains is the mystery, preserved in clay, waiting for interpretation. And so we are left to wonder. When the Ubaid potters shaped these figures, what vision guided their hands? What story did they intend to tell? And is it possible that in these small reptilian faces lies a chapter of human history still waiting to be uncovered? In the heart of Transylvania, where rolling hills meet dense forests and rivers carve their way through fertile valleys, a quiet village hides one of the most perplexing archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. In 1961, in the small settlement of Tartaria, Romania, archaeologist Nicolae Vlasa uncovered something that would challenge long-held assumptions about the origins of writing and the dawn of civilization. Buried within a Neolithic shrine were 3 small clay tablets, their surfaces carefully inscribed with strange symbols and markings. At first glance, the tablets may seem unremarkable, rough fragments of baked clay no larger than a human palm. But upon closer inspection, the mystery deepens. Carved into their surfaces are geometric patterns, pictographs, and abstract signs that appear to follow an intentional structure. One tablet is rectangular, punctured with holes along its edges, almost as if it were meant to be worn or strung together. Another bears a grid-like arrangement of signs, while the third displays symbols that bear a striking resemblance to animals, plants, and tools. Scholars quickly recognized the potential significance of these markings. The tablets were dated to around 5300 BC, placing them within the Neolithic Vinca culture, which spread across southeastern Europe. This date is extraordinary because it predates the earliest known writing systems of Mesopotamia by nearly 2 millennia. If the tablets indeed represent writing, they could rewrite the timeline of human civilization, shifting the cradle of literacy away from the Fertile Crescent and into the forests of Europe. Yet here lies the controversy. Were the symbols on the Tartaria tablets truly a form of writing, or are they something else entirely? Mainstream archaeology remains cautious. Some researchers argue that the markings do not constitute writing, but are instead proto-symbols, part of a ritual or symbolic language without grammatical structure. According to this view, the tablets were likely used in religious ceremonies, serving as sacred objects rather than records of daily life. The fact that they were found in what appeared to be a ritual pit alongside figurines and the remains of burnt offerings seems to support this interpretation. Still, others see in the tablets the seeds of true literacy. The symbols closely resemble those found on hundreds of artifacts across the Balkans, collectively known as the Vinca symbols. These markings, etched into pottery, figurines, and tools, appear again and again with remarkable consistency. Could this repetition suggest an organized system of communication, a script waiting to be deciphered? The implications are profound. If the Vinca culture did, in fact, develop a system of writing, then the traditional story of civilization, beginning with Sumer, spreading through Mesopotamia, Egypt, and beyond, must be reconsidered. Europe, long thought to be a receiver of advanced ideas from the East, may have nurtured its own independent innovation in the realm of written communication. But the mystery of the Tartaria tablets does not end with scholarly debate. Over the decades, the discovery has inspired more speculative theories. Some have noted similarities between the tablet's symbols and later scripts, from Sumerian cuneiform to early hieroglyphics. Were these signs part of a forgotten cultural exchange between distant peoples? A network of communication stretching farther and earlier than historians once believed? Others push the question further still. Could the tablets represent the remnants of a lost civilization, a culture older than recorded history, whose memory lingers only in fragments of clay? Some fringe researchers have connected them to legends of advanced ancient societies, myths of a primordial knowledge that slipped through humanity's grasp before the rise of the great empires. Of course, such theories remain outside the realm of mainstream archaeology. Yet even cautious scholars admit that the tablets pose unsettling questions. Why do these symbols appear so intentional, so structured? Why do they echo across the Vinca culture, carved into artifacts found hundreds of miles apart? And why, after the disappearance of this culture, do such symbols vanish, leaving no clear link to later scripts? The tablets themselves add to the enigma through their condition. When discovered, they were already broken and partially damaged by fire, making precise analysis difficult. Radiocarbon dating of associated materials has placed them firmly in the Neolithic era, but their incomplete state leaves room for interpretation. Were they accidentally burned, or was fire part of their ritual use? Were the holes in the rectangular tablet meant for binding, or were they symbolic, part of a ceremony we no longer understand? Standing before these clay fragments today, preserved in museum collections, one cannot help but feel a sense of awe. Their surfaces, etched with signs that seem both familiar and alien, speak across 7 millennia. To trace the grooves with one's eyes is to enter a dialogue with an unknown mind, a person who lived in a time when agriculture was still new, when stone tools still shaped daily life, and yet who carried within them an impulse to mark, to record, to communicate? What drove that impulse? Was it the desire to remember, to pass knowledge from one generation to the next? Or was it to connect with forces beyond the human realm, to inscribe prayers, rituals, or offerings into the very fabric of clay. The Tartaria tablets remain silent on these questions. No Rosetta Stone exists to unlock their secrets. No parallel text to guide translation. They linger as fragments of a story half told, leaving us to speculate where their true meaning lies. Perhaps they represent the earliest flicker of written language, a spark that never fully caught fire in Neolithic Europe. Or perhaps they are remnants of a symbolic system entirely unlike what we recognize as writing today, an ancient code of ritual, identity, and belief. And yet, when we look at them, when we imagine the hands that pressed the symbols into wet clay more than 7,000 years ago, a deeper question emerges. Are we glimpsing the birth of writing, or the shadow of a lost world whose memory has slipped through the cracks of time? Off the southern shores of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, where the East China Sea meets the Pacific, lies a world that feels almost otherworldly. Beneath the waves near Yonaguni Island, divers encounter massive stone structures rising from the ocean floor, their sharp angles and sheer walls forming terraces, steps, and geometric platforms. At first sight, the monument resembles a sunken city, its vast stairways and flat-topped surfaces evoking images of forgotten temples or ceremonial plazas hidden for thousands of years beneath the sea. The Yonaguni monument, as it has come to be known, rests about 25 meters below the surface. Its largest structure stretches nearly 150 meters in length, 40 meters wide, and 20 meters high. Dimensions that place it on par with some of humanity's most ambitious ancient constructions. To swim across it is to pass along massive ledges and corridors that appear almost carved, their edges so straight and their right angles so precise that many cannot help but wonder, was this the work of nature or of human hands? Mainstream geology offers one explanation. The monument, they argue, is the product of natural forces. Over millions of years, layers of sandstone fractured and eroded along fault lines, leaving behind the illusion of intentional design. The sea, in its relentless movement, shaped the stone into sharp edges and flat plains, just as it has carved other dramatic coastal formations across the world. According to this view, Yonaguni is remarkable, but not mysterious. An accident of geology, nothing more. And yet, questions persist. The monument features stair-like terraces rising at regular intervals, flat platforms that suggest plazas, and triangular stone pillars standing like sentinels. Some divers claim to have seen carvings resembling animals or symbols on the walls. Others describe what looks like a massive stone face staring out from the depths, though time, coral growth, and currents make such features difficult to confirm. Could the regularity of the design truly be dismissed as coincidence? Supporters of the human-made theory point out that the Ryukyu Islands were once home to thriving cultures thousands of years before written history. They argue that during the last ice age, when sea levels were significantly lower, the Yonaguni monument may have stood on dry land. If so, could it have been built by a lost coastal society, later swallowed by the ocean as the glaciers melted and waters rose? If true, the implications are staggering. The last ice age ended around 10,000 BC. That would place the construction of Yonaguni far earlier than any known advanced architecture in Japan, or, for that matter, in much of the world. Such a date would suggest that human civilization reached a level of complexity long before conventional archaeology recognizes. But the evidence remains elusive. Excavations are difficult in the underwater environment, and the monument itself is dangerous to explore due to strong currents. Skeptics caution that divers often interpret what they wish to see, their imaginations projecting temples, faces, and plazas onto natural rock. Without artifacts, tools, pottery, or human remains, The case for Yonaguni as an ancient city remains speculative, and yet the monument continues to attract researchers, divers, and dreamers from across the globe. Some see in its terraces and platforms echoes of step pyramids found in other parts of the world. Others compare it to the megalithic ruins of South America, suggesting that perhaps ancient cultures were more connected than we realize. A few even invoke the legends of lost civilizations, stories of sunken lands like Mu or Atlantis, whispered in myth and folklore across continents. Could Yonaguni be a surviving fragment of one such tale, a piece of history drowned by time and tide? Local traditions add another layer to the enigma. The Ryukyu Islands are steeped in myths of gods descending from the heavens and lands lost beneath the sea. Some residents see Yonaguni not as mere stone, but as a sacred place where human memory intersects with the mysteries of the ocean. Yet despite decades of debate, consensus remains out of reach. Geological surveys continue to emphasize natural explanations, while alternative researchers highlight the uncanny regularity of the formations. Neither side can fully silence the other, for the monument itself resists simple categorization. It lies between worlds, between natural wonder and human construction, between science and legend, between the known and the unknown. What perhaps makes Yonaguni most compelling is its silence. Unlike other archaeological sites, it offers no inscriptions to interpret, no artifacts to analyze, no clear markers of cultural origin. It is instead a structure of stone and sea, speaking in forms and shadows, leaving us to ask, what exactly are we seeing? Is it an extraordinary quirk of geology, a case of natural processes masquerading as architecture? Or is it the weathered skeleton of a civilization that history has forgotten? As the currents sweep across its surfaces and divers drift along its ledges, one cannot help but feel that Yonaguni is withholding a story of ancient people, or of the earth itself, written in the language of rock and water. Perhaps future discoveries will provide clarity. Perhaps artifacts still lie buried in the sands nearby, waiting for chance or persistence to bring them to light. Until then, the Yonaguni monument remains suspended between possibility and mystery, a vast, silent witness beneath the waves. And as we gaze upon its terraces and towers, we are left with a question as vast as the ocean itself. Are we standing at the edge of nature's artistry, or at the threshold of humanity's forgotten past? High on the windswept altiplano of western Bolivia, where the horizon stretches endlessly beneath a pale, thin sky, lies one of the least understood creations on Earth. Etched into the barren landscape around Mount Sajama, Bolivia's highest peak, are countless straight lines, tens of thousands of them, scratched across the desert floor. Faint yet unmistakable, they stretch for miles in perfect precision, intersecting and overlapping to form a vast geometric web that seems to extend without end. Known today as the Sajama Lines, this network covers an estimated 13,000 square miles, an area nearly the size of the state of Maryland. From the ground, the lines are subtle, appearing as shallow grooves, perhaps only a few centimeters deep, carved into the hard desert crust. But from above, the scope becomes staggering. Dozens of lines run parallel, converging in distant vanishing points, while others crisscross like the threads of an immense tapestry. Some stretch straight for more than 10 miles without a single deviation, an astonishing feat of precision in such rugged terrain. The lines are not merely random markings. Scattered along their lengths stand ancient shrines, burial towers, and small villages, traces of cultures that once thrived in this high-altitude expanse. Many researchers believe the Sajama Lines were pathways, connecting sacred sites, pilgrimage routes, and settlements across the plateau. Their orientation suggests a deliberate attempt to impose order upon the vastness of the land, to draw invisible threads between the earthly and the divine. But questions remain. Why so many lines? Why such extraordinary lengths? And how did ancient peoples, without modern surveying equipment, manage to maintain such remarkable straightness over distances that even today would challenge engineers? Archaeologists propose that the lines were made by carefully clearing away the surface layer of dark volcanic rock and soil, exposing the lighter sediment beneath. This method explains the sharp contrast that allows the lines to remain visible after centuries of wind and weather. Yet, this explanation only deepens the mystery. The sheer scale of the project is almost unfathomable. Creating tens of thousands of lines, each extending for miles, would have required generations of labor and coordination. What purpose could have justified such an effort? Some suggest the lines served primarily religious functions. The indigenous Aymara and other Andean peoples often regarded mountains, rivers, and the land itself as sacred. Pilgrims may have walked the Sajama lines as part of ritual journeys, tracing paths that aligned with holy landmarks or celestial events. In this sense, the lines could have been more than roads. They might have been prayers etched into the earth, symbols of devotion meant to endure across centuries. Others propose a more practical function. The lines could have served as a vast navigational system guiding travelers across the often featureless plateau. In a region where the horizon is immense and disorienting, the straight paths may have provided direction, leading from water sources to settlements, or from village to shrine. Yet still others see something even more enigmatic. When viewed from the air, the Sajama lines bear a striking resemblance to the more famous Nazca lines of southern Peru. Unlike Nazca, the Sajama lines do not form animal figures or elaborate glyphs. They are purely linear. But the similarity raises a question. Could these immense geoglyphs be part of a broader Andean tradition, one that spanned hundreds of miles and thousands of years? If so, what shared worldview compelled different cultures to inscribe the earth with such vast designs? The lack of definitive dating only deepens the enigma. Scholars struggle to assign the lines to a particular culture or period. Some may be thousands of years old, others, more recent, layered upon one another in a palimpsest of human activity. Without precise chronology, it becomes difficult to separate fact from speculation. Were the Sajama lines the work of a single culture with an ambitious vision, or a cumulative creation? Centuries of markings by successive peoples, each adding their own threads to the web. More speculative theories push the mystery further still. Some researchers note that the straightness of the lines, stretching over hills and valleys with little deviation, would have required extraordinary surveying skills. Could this suggest a knowledge of geometry and land measurement far more advanced than we typically attribute to pre-Columbian cultures? Others wonder if the lines could have had astronomical alignments, marking solstices or star paths across the high-altitude sky. And then there are the more fringe ideas, that the lines were created not just for human ritual, but to signal beings from the heavens. Much like the Nazca lines, some have speculated that the Sajama network might have been intended as a message to the gods, or, in the eyes of more speculative thinkers, to visitors from beyond our world. From above, the lines certainly take on a different dimension, as if meant to be read by eyes not bound to the earth. Whether viewed as sacred walkways, navigational routes, or something more mysterious, the Sajama lines remind us of the vast human capacity for symbolic expression. In a land of sparse vegetation and stark beauty, people left behind not monuments of stone, but immense patterns inscribed directly into the living landscape. They endure not because of their height or mass, but because of their sheer scale and persistence, lines so vast that they can only truly be seen from the sky. And so, the questions linger. Who first drew these lines, and why? Was it devotion, necessity, or something altogether different? In the windswept silence of the Bolivian plateau, The Sajama lines stretch endlessly toward the horizon, challenging us to imagine their meaning. Perhaps they are roads. Perhaps they are prayers. Or perhaps they are something we have not yet learned to recognize. In the quiet heart of central France, not far from the town of Vichy, lies the village of Glozel. Rolling hills and pastoral fields surround it, a landscape that seems timeless, shaped by centuries of rural life. It was here, in 1924, that a discovery would ignite one of the most heated controversies in the history of archaeology, a discovery that still lingers in shadow, unresolved nearly a century later. A young farmer named Émile Fradin was plowing his family's field when his plow struck something solid. Curious, he dug further, unearthing a chamber of stone and clay. Inside, he found objects unlike anything seen before: engraved tablets, ceramic fragments, carved bones, and strange artifacts that seemed to whisper of an unknown past. Over the weeks and months that followed, hundreds of items emerged: inscribed tablets covered in mysterious symbols, human and animal figurines, and tools that seemed to belong to entirely different ages. At first glance, the tablets were the most perplexing. Their surfaces were etched with symbols, some resembling letters, others appearing more like pictographs. To some observers, they looked like a form of writing. But if that were true, they posed a staggering question: who had inscribed them, and when? If the Glozel tablets were truly ancient, they could represent a previously unknown written language, perhaps even the missing link in Europe's prehistoric communication. Almost immediately, the discovery divided the academic world. Some scholars hailed it as revolutionary, suggesting the artifacts could date back thousands of years, even to the Neolithic or Bronze Age. They pointed to the inscriptions as possible evidence of early European literacy, a tantalizing idea that could rewrite the story of Western civilization. Others, however, were skeptical. To them, the artifacts seemed suspiciously eclectic, a mixture of styles and materials, with some objects resembling those from the Iron Age, others from Roman times, and still others with no clear parallels at all. How could one site produce such a puzzling blend? As the debate grew, accusations began to fly. Critics claimed the tablets were modern forgeries, perhaps planted by Fradin, or others hoping to gain attention or financial reward. Supporters countered that such accusations were not only unfounded, but insulting to a young farmer who had stumbled upon the site by chance. The controversy soon expanded beyond archaeology, spilling into personal rivalries, lawsuits, and even heated exchanges in the press. Scientific analysis brought no easy answers. Early tests of the artifact's age were inconsistent, with some suggesting great antiquity, while others hinted at more recent origins. The soil surrounding the finds did not always correspond neatly to the proposed dates. Meanwhile, the inscriptions themselves defied classification. Were they truly an ancient script? If so, why did they bear similarities to known alphabets, yet never match any of them exactly? Over the years, various theories emerged. Some suggested the tablets represented a forgotten Celtic script, predating known writing in the region. Others speculated they were linked to early Mediterranean influences, perhaps carried northward by trade routes long before Roman expansion. A few proposed connections to even older civilizations, hinting at cultural exchanges stretching back to the dawn of agriculture. And then there were those who insisted the tablets were the product of a deliberate hoax, crafted to mimic antiquity without belonging to it. The mystery deepened as more artifacts were cataloged, over 3,000 in total. Figurines made of clay and stone, bones carved with strange designs, even objects that resembled tools of medicine or ritual. The sheer volume of material seemed to argue against forgery. Could anyone have fabricated so many items, each with unique characteristics, without detection? And if they were genuine, what culture could have produced them? And why had no other traces been found elsewhere? the debate raged through the 20th century, with moments of renewed interest followed by periods of silence. Some researchers returned to the site to conduct fresh excavations, only to find further ambiguities. The soil layers appeared disturbed, complicating efforts to establish a clear timeline. Yet the artifacts themselves retained their enigmatic allure, as if deliberately resisting categorization. In more recent years, advanced dating methods have provided some clarity, but not resolution. Certain objects indeed appear ancient, while others may be more recent intrusions into the site. The inscriptions remain undeciphered, their meaning, if they carry meaning at all, still locked away. For some, this inconsistency strengthens the argument for forgery. For others, it suggests the site was used repeatedly across centuries, a sacred or symbolic place where different cultures left their marks. And so, the Glozel tablets continue to hover between worlds, between the accepted history of Europe and the possibility of a forgotten chapter. Were they the work of a lost culture, an echo of literacy in prehistoric France? Were they imitations crafted in more recent times, inspired by fragments of ancient memory? Or are they something else entirely, a puzzle that reflects not only the mystery of the past, but the challenges of interpreting it in the present? In the hushed fields of Glozel, the earth still holds its silence. The tablets sit in collections, their inscriptions unread, their origins uncertain. Perhaps they are a key to rewriting Europe's ancient story, or perhaps they are a reminder of how little we truly know about the layers of human history buried beneath our feet. And as with so many mysteries in archaeology, the question lingers: are we looking at the remnants of a civilization we have forgotten, or at an illusion crafted in our own time? Until the day when the tablets speak clearly, the enigma of Glozel remains unsolved, inviting us to wonder what other secrets still lie hidden in the soil of the ordinary and the overlooked. Beyond the dusty ridges and rocky hillsides of modern-day Amman, where highways now cut across what was once fertile river valley, lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the ancient world. At first glance, the site of Ghazal seems unassuming, just a scattering of mounds along the banks of the Zarqa River. But beneath this landscape, hidden for millennia, archaeologists unearthed something that would challenge every assumption about prehistoric art, ritual, and belief. In 1983, during a routine construction project, workers inadvertently exposed a burial pit filled with statues unlike anything ever seen before. Carefully shaped from plaster and reeds, they stood nearly life-sized, with wide almond-shaped eyes, elongated faces, and hauntingly expressionless mouths. Some statues were full-bodied figures, while others represented only torsos or busts. The largest stood more than 3 feet tall. Together, they formed one of the earliest known large-scale representations of the human form, dating back nearly 9,000 years, long before the pyramids of Egypt, long before the great cities of Mesopotamia. The discovery was astonishing. Here, in a Neolithic farming community, people had created sculptures of remarkable sophistication. They were not crude figurines or simple carvings, but carefully constructed forms built around reed frames and layered with plaster until human likenesses emerged. Their eyes, made of bitumen and shells, seemed to gaze outward with unsettling intensity. To stand before them, even today, is to feel both recognition and unease. Faces eerily familiar, yet utterly alien. But what were they for? Why did the people of Ain Ghazal dedicate such immense effort and resources to creating these statues, only to bury them deliberately in pits? Some archaeologists believe they were ritual objects, used in ceremonies that bound the community together. The burial pits may have been a kind of retirement, a symbolic act of returning these figures to the earth once their purpose had been fulfilled. Others suggest the statues represented ancestors, guardians, or deities, forming a bridge between the living and the unseen world. What is striking, however, is that the statues were not individualized. They do not bear the marks of portraiture. Instead, they appear abstract, human but generalized, as though meant to embody humanity itself rather than specific people. Were they meant to represent spirits, collective identity, or even an idealized vision of what it meant to be human? And if they were ancestors, why leave them faceless, anonymous, without the features that define individuality? The context of Ghazal adds further complexity. This was a community at the threshold of monumental change. Farming and herding were replacing hunting and gathering. Populations were growing, social structures shifting. With these transformations came new pressures: how to organize society, how to preserve memory, how to define the relationship between the living and the dead. Could the statues be a response to this transition, a symbolic anchor in a world being reshaped? Mainstream interpretations lean toward the statues as ritual artifacts, designed to embody spiritual or social functions. Yet more speculative voices have raised different possibilities. Some suggest the statues may encode knowledge, perhaps a symbolic language, a way of recording identity or lineage before the advent of writing. Others go further, proposing connections to myths of hybrid beings, or even extraterrestrial influences, pointing to the statues' unsettling proportions, their elongated heads and staring eyes. While such ideas remain firmly outside accepted scholarship, they reflect the uncanny presence these figures still command. Another mystery lies in the sheer scale of production. Dozens of statues have been recovered, but fragments suggest there may once have been hundreds. For a Neolithic village, this represented a massive investment of time and resources. Why commit so much to objects that were never displayed, but instead entombed underground? Was the act of creation itself, the ritual, the process more important than the final result? Or were the statues made to serve a function in life, only later to be hidden away? Even the materials raise questions. The use of plaster, essentially an early form of synthetic stone, was innovative and labor-intensive. It required burning limestone at high temperatures, a process that demanded both technological skill and significant fuel. Why was this technique chosen, rather than carving figures from wood or stone, which were more readily available? Did the shimmering white surfaces carry symbolic meaning, perhaps linked to purity, the afterlife, or light itself? The statue's burial adds another layer of intrigue. They were placed carefully in pits, often in groups, as if part of a coordinated ritual. They were not smashed or discarded as trash, but treated with reverence, even as they were hidden from sight. This suggests a worldview in which objects could live and die, participating in cycles of use and burial, much like humans themselves. Today, the statues are preserved in museums, where visitors peer at them through glass, their ancient plaster cracked, but still striking. To modern eyes, they appear timeless, almost otherworldly, yet they remain tethered to a very specific moment in human history, a time when communities were negotiating the dawn of civilization. They are silent witnesses to the hopes, fears, and beliefs of people whose voices are otherwise lost. And so the questions linger. Were the Ghazal statues ancestors or gods, symbols of power or memory, or something altogether beyond our imagination? Were they created to preserve identity, to summon protection, or to embody mysteries that even their makers could not fully articulate? The truth remains buried in the soil of Amman, half revealed and half hidden, just as it has been for 9 millennia. The statues look back at us with their wide, unblinking eyes, as if asking us to see not just them, but ourselves. What compelled ancient people to shape these faces, to give form to something they felt was larger than life? And more importantly, what might still lie undiscovered beneath the ground, waiting for the day when the earth decides to give up another secret? High in the Andes, some 12,000 feet above sea level, lies a place that seems suspended between worlds. The Marcahuasi Plateau, east of Lima, Peru, is a vast expanse of volcanic rock and open sky. Here the air is thin, the winds sharp, and the silence profound, broken only by the occasional cry of an eagle or the shifting of clouds across the jagged peaks. To stand on this plateau is to feel at once exposed and enclosed, as though one has stepped into a natural amphitheater carved not by chance, but by intention. It is not the altitude or the isolation that draws attention to Marcahuasi, but the shapes. Scattered across the plateau are massive stone formations that, from certain angles, seem to take on familiar and uncanny forms. Towering profiles appear to emerge from the rock, a solemn face gazing toward the horizon, the outline of a lion, an Egyptian-like Sphinx, even what some claim to resemble extraterrestrial beings. To many who visit, the stones seem alive, as though they are frozen remnants of a forgotten age. Geologists, of course, point to natural explanations. The plateau is composed largely of volcanic rock, weathered by thousands of years of wind, rain, and seismic activity. Over time, erosion can shape stone into surprising, even uncanny forms. Faces and figures that exist only in the human eye, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. In this view, Marcahuasi is no different than the shifting forms of clouds or the rugged cliffs of other mountain ranges. The statues are illusions, coincidences of nature. And yet, Marcahuasi resists simple dismissal. The sheer number of formations, their size, and their suggestive alignments invite questions that geology alone does not fully satisfy. Why do so many of these shapes resemble human and animal figures with such striking clarity? Why do certain profiles seem to be oriented toward solstices and star patterns, echoing the astronomical alignments found in other ancient sites across the world? The first to bring widespread attention to Marcahuasi was the Peruvian explorer Daniel Russo in the 1950s. He believed the plateau was once a sacred sanctuary built by a civilization older than any known in the Andes, perhaps tens of thousands of years before the rise of the Inca. Russo argued that the stone monuments were deliberately carved, intended to preserve messages across the ages. He saw in them warnings of past cataclysms, left behind for future generations to decipher. According to his theory, Marcahuasi was not just a site of worship, but a kind of library in stone, transmitting knowledge from a vanished world. Mainstream archaeology, however, has never embraced Russo's ideas. No clear evidence of human carving has been found. No tool marks, no inscriptions, no cultural layers to link the stones to known societies. The plateau, they argue, is a geological wonder, not a human construction. Yet Russo's vision lingers, kept alive by those who continue to find meaning in the shapes, the alignments, and the uncanny sense of presence that the stones seem to project. Beyond the question of human intervention, Marcahuasi carries an aura of the mystical. Local legends tell of strange lights seen at night, of visitors experiencing visions or feelings of timelessness. Some describe the plateau as a place of energy, where the veil between the physical and the spiritual thins. Others whisper of UFO sightings, suggesting the formations may have served as markers or landing sites for beings not of this earth. While such claims remain speculative, they feed the plateau's reputation as a place where mystery and reality blur. There are also those who see Marcahuasi through a different lens, not as a relic of lost civilizations, but as a mirror of the human mind. The plateau becomes a canvas on which people project their own myths, fears, and hopes. The face in the stone may not have been carved by ancient hands, but shaped instead by our innate desire to find patterns, to see ourselves reflected in the natural world. If so, Marcahuasi is not only a mystery of stone, but a mystery of perception. Still, some questions remain more difficult to dismiss. Why do so many visitors report similar impressions of the same formations, as if the figures are more than accidental? Could it be that ancient peoples did, in fact, recognize these natural forms and use the plateau as a ceremonial site precisely because of them, integrating the stones into a sacred landscape without the need to carve them? In this sense, Marcahuasi might resemble other places where natural formations were imbued with spiritual significance, transformed not by tools but by meaning. As the sun sets on the plateau, shadows lengthen and the faces of stone grow more distinct. One can imagine ancient gatherings here, fires flickering against the rocks, stories echoing across the high plain. Did those who once lived in these valleys climb the plateau to commune with gods or ancestors, reading the shapes as messages from the earth itself? Or did they, like us, simply marvel at the strangeness of nature, sensing something vast and unknowable in the silence of the stones? Marcahuasi holds its secrets close. To some, it is a geological curiosity. To others, a spiritual sanctuary, a message in stone, or even a link to civilizations we have yet to recognize. Perhaps it is all of these at once, or perhaps none. What is certain is that the plateau continues to provoke awe and wonder, refusing to settle into the tidy categories of science or myth. And so, the stones remain, watching, waiting. Silent witnesses on a high Andean plateau, asking us questions we cannot yet answer. Were they carved, imagined, or simply revealed by time itself? And if they are messages, who exactly were they meant for? Not far from the bustling heart of modern-day Mexico City, beneath the soil of a quiet archaeological site, an object emerged that should not have been there. In 1933, Austrian archaeologist José García Payón was excavating the ancient site of Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca, once part of the powerful Matlatzinca culture, when he unearthed something wholly unexpected. A small terracotta head, worn by time, yet bearing features strikingly foreign to the Americas. The object, roughly the size of a clenched fist, was unlike the artifacts surrounding it. Where nearby ceramics and figurines bore the familiar styles of Mesoamerican craft, this head seemed to belong to another tradition altogether. Its rounded eyes, neatly carved nose, and distinct beard immediately suggested to some scholars a resemblance to classical Mediterranean art, specifically the Hellenistic or Roman styles of the Old World. To find such an object in the valley of Toluca, far from the shores of Europe, raised a question that rippled far beyond the dig site. How did it get there? Mainstream archaeology emphasizes context. The head was found in a burial site, accompanied by grave goods consistent with pre-Hispanic culture. Radiocarbon dating of the burial layers placed the interment around the 9th century AD, long before European explorers officially set foot in the Americas. Yet, stylistically, the head appeared to belong to a tradition from across the Atlantic, dating not to medieval Spain, but to the Mediterranean world of the 1st centuries BC or AD. The apparent contradiction sparked debate. Could the object have been intrusive, dropped into the burial much later, perhaps during colonial times, when contact between the old and new worlds was well established? Skeptics argue that contamination is not uncommon in archaeological contexts, and a misplaced object could easily confuse the narrative of a site. In this view, the head may have been a stray colonial import, buried by accident or ritual, long after the original tomb was sealed. But those who examined the artifact more closely noted details that challenged this explanation. García Payón himself insisted that the head was firmly embedded within the sealed context of the pre-Hispanic burial. Later, in the 1960s, Austrian anthropologist Robert Heine Geldern suggested the head bore unmistakable Roman influence, perhaps from around the 2nd century AD. If true, the implications were staggering. Could there have been contact between the old and new worlds long before Columbus, long before the voyages of the Norse across the North Atlantic? Some theorists suggest that a Roman ship blown off course might have carried traders, or perhaps even exiles, across the ocean, leaving behind a single fragment of evidence in the highlands of Mexico. Others look further back, wondering whether transoceanic contact could have occurred sporadically across centuries, leaving only the faintest of traces. More cautious voices, however, urge restraint. Ancient trade networks were vast, stretching from the Mediterranean to Africa, India, and beyond. Objects often traveled far from their points of origin, passed hand to hand, culture to culture. Could the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head have traveled along unknown routes, reaching the Americas through a chain of exchanges? Or is such a scenario simply too far-fetched, given the lack of corroborating finds? The mystery deepened in 1969, when Austrian archaeologist Franz Boerhaave reviewed the case. He too concluded that the head strongly resembled Roman or Hellenistic styles, suggesting it might date as far back as 200 BC. Yet without additional artifacts to support the claim, the discovery remained an isolated anomaly, a puzzle piece without a larger picture. Speculation, naturally, did not end there. Some fringe theories propose that the head is evidence of deliberate voyages across the Atlantic, perhaps by Mediterranean seafarers who possessed greater navigational skills than mainstream history allows. Others even push the mystery into more speculative territory, suggesting that such artifacts hint at forgotten civilizations or knowledge of the wider world far earlier than we have assumed. For local communities and spiritual seekers, however, the artifact represents something more than a historical puzzle. Some view it as a symbol of cultural convergence, a reminder that the ancient world was not as isolated as textbooks might suggest. Others interpret it through a more mystical lens, as evidence of hidden currents of history that continue to elude the grasp of scholars and skeptics alike. Today, the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head resides quietly in a collection seldom displayed, more often mentioned in footnotes and fringe discussions than in the halls of mainstream museums. Yet for those who encounter its story, the questions remain. Could it be a simple case of intrusion, a colonial object misplaced into an older burial? Or is it, as Garcia Payon and Heine Geldern suggested, an authentic anomaly, a fragment of the Mediterranean world resting inexplicably in pre-Hispanic Mexico? Standing before the head, one cannot help but wonder, is this small terracotta fragment a messenger from another time, evidence of connections we have yet to uncover? Or is it merely a trick of circumstance, a chance displacement that whispers of mysteries that never truly were? The truth remains elusive, and as with so many puzzles of the ancient world, the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head continues to sit uneasily between certainty and speculation, an artifact that refuses to surrender its secret, waiting for us to ask whether the story of the past is far wider, far stranger than we yet imagine. Deep beneath the rolling plains of South Africa, within layers of rock that predate humanity itself, miners stumbled upon something that would ignite one of the most peculiar debates in archaeology. Resting inside deposits of pyrophyllite, stone so ancient it dates back nearly 3 billion years, were small, metallic spheres, smooth, symmetrical, and often grooved with parallel lines etched across their surface. These enigmatic objects became known as the Klerksdorp spheres. At first glance, they seem unremarkable. No larger than a child's fist, most measure between half an inch and a few inches in diameter. Some are perfectly spherical, while others are slightly flattened, resembling discs. Their colors range from a shimmering bluish hue to a deep rusty red. Yet it is their apparent precision, so strikingly out of place in such ancient rock, that has captivated scientists, skeptics, and dreamers alike. How could such objects exist within geological strata that formed billions of years before human civilization, before life itself had taken complex form on Earth? Were they natural formations, the product of slow mineral growth and pressure over unimaginable spans of time? Or could they suggest something more, anomalies that hint at a history not yet written? Geologists offer a measured explanation. The spheres, they argue, are the result of natural concretion processes, minerals crystallizing within sedimentary layers, gradually forming into spherical shapes. The grooves, they suggest, could be caused by natural fissures, or by slight variations in mineral density as the spheres formed under immense geological pressure. In this view, the Klerksdorp spheres are not artifacts at all, but products of nature's ability to sculpt matter into deceptively ordered forms. But not all observers are satisfied with this reasoning. Some of the spheres appear to be unnervingly precise, with grooves circling their equators in a manner that suggests deliberate workmanship. A handful are balanced so perfectly they roll with unusual smoothness, as if shaped with intention rather than accident. When placed side by side, their uniformity raises unsettling questions. Could mere geology produce such regularity? The debate intensified when local reports began to circulate, claiming that some of the spheres were so finely balanced that they spun on their own axis when placed on flat surfaces. While such stories have been met with skepticism, they added an air of mystery that continues to surround the objects to this day. For mainstream science, the case remains closed. The spheres, they assert, are nothing more than natural formations known as concretions, similar to the spherical Moki marbles of Utah or the remarkable stone concretions found in New Zealand's Meraki boulders. In this framework, the Klerksdorp spheres are geological curiosities, remarkable but not evidence of anything beyond nature's capacity for symmetry. And yet, whispers of other possibilities persist. Some fringe theorists argue that the spheres are remnants of a lost technological age, artifacts of a civilization so ancient it has been entirely erased from memory. Could they be the bearings of a forgotten machine, or fragments of tools long dissolved into myth? Others look upward rather than backward, suggesting extraterrestrial origins, objects seated within Earth's crust, left behind by visitors from beyond. Of course, there is no concrete evidence for such claims. No inscriptions, no fragments of larger devices, no corroborating artifacts lie alongside the spheres. Yet their very presence in strata billions of years old fuels speculation. How could something so orderly, so seemingly artificial, exist in a time before humans, or any intelligent beings, walked the planet? Perhaps the fascination lies less in the spheres themselves and more in what they represent. They challenge our sense of chronology, our certainty about the story of the Earth. They remind us that the line between natural and artificial is not always as clear as we would like to believe. Standing before one of these objects, its surface marked with fine grooves that seem to trace the passage of some unknown hand, or perhaps the slow carving of deep time, you cannot help but feel a quiet unease. Is this sphere a simple trick of geology, a reminder that nature can imitate the precision of human craft? Or is it a message from a past so distant, so alien, that it slips through the cracks of our imagination? The Klerksdorp spheres remain locked in glass cases, preserved in small museums in South Africa. Visitors peer at them through the reflection of display lights, often unaware that the stone around them is older than life itself, older than the continents in their present form. They are objects caught between science and speculation, resting in that gray zone where certainty fades and mystery lingers. And so, the questions endure. Were these spheres simply sculpted by the patient hand of nature, repeating patterns across billions of years? Or do they carry within their grooves a story we have yet to decipher? As with so many unsolved archaeological enigmas, the answers remain elusive. The Klerksdorp spheres stand as silent witnesses from an age beyond memory, daring us to look closer, to ask deeper questions, and to wonder what other secrets might still lie hidden in the ancient stones beneath our feet. As our journey through the world's most puzzling relics continues, we travel from the heart of Africa to the rugged, windswept coast of Pakistan. Here, where the arid landscapes of Balochistan meet the restless waters of the Arabian Sea, an enigmatic form emerges from the barren cliffs. Rising above the desolate Makran coast, within a place known as the Hingol National Park, stands what many call the Sphinx of Balochistan. At first sight, it appears almost unmistakable. A colossal stone figure with a head that seems to bear the outlines of a headdress, a face-like structure staring silently into the horizon, and the suggestion of paws stretched forward in repose. The resemblance to the Great Sphinx of Giza is uncanny, so striking, in fact, that travelers have long wondered whether this lonely monument in Pakistan is a natural formation, or the weathered echo of an ancient civilization now forgotten. The setting only deepens the mystery. The Makran coastline is a place of harsh beauty, barren mountains carved by wind and time, their sandstone faces etched into strange, almost sculptural forms. The Sphinx of Balochistan sits among these dramatic landscapes, partially obscured by surrounding cliffs and eroded ridges. To the casual eye, its symmetry seems too deliberate, its contours too precise to be mere chance. From certain angles, one can almost imagine it as a sentinel, keeping watch over the desert and the sea beyond. Mainstream geologists are quick to offer an explanation. They argue that the Sphinx of Balochistan is a perfect example of pareidolia, the human tendency to impose familiar patterns on natural shapes. Over millennia, the action of wind and rain on soft sandstone has carved countless formations in the Hingol region. Just as cliffs elsewhere resemble castles, towers, or animals, here the stone happened to mimic the form of a sphinx. Nature, they insist, is capable of producing illusions far more precise than we might expect. Yet questions persist. Some researchers and observers point to features that appear uncannily structured. The defined lines along what resembles a headdress, the angular chest beneath, and the symmetry of the supposed paws. These elements, they argue, suggest more than coincidence. Could this be evidence of human craftsmanship, eroded beyond recognition but still carrying the fingerprint of intention? What deepens the intrigue further is the presence of nearby formations that, to some, resemble steps, platforms, or even the remnants of ancient temple-like structures. In satellite imagery, enthusiasts claim to see the outlines of a complex: walls, courtyards, and geometrically aligned terraces buried under centuries of silt and stone. Could the Sphinx of Balochistan once have been part of a grander architectural plan, now obscured by time? If so, the implications would be profound. The Makran coast lies far from the centers of known ancient civilizations, yet history shows it was not always isolated. This rugged shoreline was once part of trade routes linking Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and beyond. Mariners sailed these waters carrying goods, ideas, and perhaps even myths. Could a forgotten culture have flourished here, leaving behind monuments that rivaled those of Egypt or Mesopotamia? Some speculative theories suggest that the Sphinx of Balochistan could date back tens of thousands of years, perhaps to a time when advanced civilizations rose and fell long before the pages of recorded history. Others even link it to legends of lost continents and cataclysmic floods, drawing parallels with the Great Flood stories shared across cultures. Could the Sphinx, they ask, be a surviving remnant of a world swept away by disaster? Of course, such ideas remain far from proven. No formal archaeological excavations have been carried out at the site, and much of what we see in the stone may indeed be the product of erosion and imagination. Yet the mystery persists precisely because the site has not been studied in depth. Without excavation, without surveys or carbon dating of surrounding material, the question lingers in the air, unresolved. The very ambiguity of the Sphinx of Balochistan has made it a canvas for speculation. Is it a monument carved by ancient hands, eroded beyond recognition? Or is it a natural marvel, sculpted only by the elements but so eerily lifelike that we cannot help but wonder? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. A natural formation later adapted or revered by early peoples who passed along its story. Standing before the Sphinx, amid the silence of the Balochistan desert, one cannot escape a sense of awe. Whether born of man or nature, it commands attention. Its form, weathered and timeless, stirs something deep within us. A reminder that our world still holds secrets, written not in words, but in stone. And so the Sphinx of Balochistan continues to keep its silence, its true origin shrouded in shadow. Is it a mere trick of geology, a coincidence etched into sandstone? Or does it whisper of a lost civilization, one whose memory has slipped beyond history's reach? Until the stones themselves give up their secrets, the mystery remains. And perhaps that is the most haunting truth of all, that even in our age of satellites and science, there are still places where the past waits, hidden, daring us to ask what else may yet be discovered. From the windswept cliffs of Balochistan, where the stone Sphinx gazes silently toward the horizon, we now journey eastward, across deserts, seas, and mountains, into the mist-laden islands of Japan. Here, nestled in the fertile plains and river valleys, lie remnants of one of the world's oldest continuous cultures. And among the clay shards, stone tools, and ancient hearths of this land, archaeologists have uncovered objects so unusual, so striking in form, that they defy easy explanation. They are known simply as Dogu. Small in size, yet monumental in mystery, Dogu figurines stand between 10 and 30 centimeters tall. Crafted from clay during Japan's Jomon period, spanning roughly 14,000 BC to 400 BC. They depict human-like figures, yet with proportions and features that appear anything but ordinary. Their heads are often large, sometimes round, sometimes triangular. Eyes are exaggerated, huge, almond-shaped, or resembling the lenses of goggles. Bodies are marked with intricate patterns, swirling designs, and geometric incisions. Some have wide hips, elongated torsos, or what appear to be protective suits. Others wear strange headgear or bear markings that evoke modern interpretations of armor or machinery. What were these curious objects meant to represent? And why did the Jomon people, hunter-gatherers who thrived for millennia in harmony with Japan's forests and seas, devote such care to crafting them? Mainstream archaeology suggests that Dogu figurines were ritual objects, tied closely to the spiritual life of the Jomon. Many believe they were connected to fertility, healing, and protection. Their exaggerated female features, broad hips, swollen bellies, and large breasts, are thought to symbolize life-giving power, perhaps used in ceremonies to bless childbirth or ensure agricultural abundance. Others may have served as effigies, into which illness or misfortune was symbolically transferred before the figurine was deliberately broken, releasing its burden. But even within this conventional framework, questions linger. Why do so many Dogu feature eyes and faces so far removed from natural human anatomy? Why are their bodies covered in geometric carvings that suggest more than mere ornamentation? And why do some appear clad in what resembles helmets, suits, or even mechanical gear, imagery that feels curiously out of place in a Stone Age society? It is here that speculation begins to blur the line between archaeology and mystery. To some, the Dogu figurines are simply artistic abstractions, ancient attempts to represent the human form through symbolic exaggeration. To others, however, their appearance seems almost too modern, too alien. Could these objects depict something the Jomon people witnessed? Something extraordinary beyond the boundaries of their everyday experience? One fringe theory posits that the Dogu resemble figures in protective suits, what we might today interpret as spacesuits. The large, round eyes resemble goggles. The bulky torsos suggest padding or armor. The patterns etched into their clay could be interpreted as seams or technical detailing. Supporters of this idea argue that the Jomon people may have encountered beings from beyond, immortalizing them in clay as best they could. To skeptics, however, such ideas are little more than imaginative projections. Modern minds seeing spacecraft and technology in the abstract art of an ancient culture. Other scholars have suggested that the figurines may represent shamans or spiritual intermediaries, their exaggerated eyes symbolic of vision beyond the ordinary, their markings indicative of ritual attire. In this view, the Dogu are not depictions of physical beings, but of spiritual ones, entities that moved between worlds, carrying prayers, healing, and mysteries with them. Adding to the puzzle is the sheer number of Dogu discovered. More than 15,000 have been unearthed across Japan, yet no two are entirely alike. Each carries its own variation of style, design, and detail, as though individual communities or families imbued them with personal meaning. Some were carefully buried, others deliberately broken, and many found in places that suggest ceremonial rather than everyday use. This widespread distribution raises another question. Were the Dogu part of a shared, overarching belief system, or were they localized creations, tied to specific rituals and stories that are now forever lost? The Jomon culture itself deepens the enigma. Long before rice cultivation spread across Japan, the Jomon people developed a remarkably stable way of life, leaving behind some of the earliest examples of pottery in the world. Their society endured for thousands of years, far longer than most civilizations we think of as great. Yet the meanings behind many of their practices remain obscure, and the Dogu figurines stand at the very heart of this silence. And standing before a Dogu today, whether in the dim light of a museum or in the soil where it was unearthed, one cannot help but wonder, what did its makers see in it? Was it an object of reverence, a tool of healing, a vessel for unseen forces? Or was it something else entirely, something we are still too far removed from to understand? The Dogu figurines remind us that the past is not a closed book, but a series of whispers carried through time. Their wide eyes seem to gaze not only at the world around them, but perhaps also at us, across thousands of years, silently challenging our assumptions. Are we projecting our modern visions onto them, or are they quietly hinting at realities we have yet to grasp? For now, the Dogu remain as they have always been, enigmatic, fragile, and eternal. They are artifacts of clay, yet they carry with them a weight far greater than their size. They invite us to reflect not only on the mysteries of the Jomon, but on the nature of mystery itself. And so we are left with the question, what truths lie behind those strange eyes, staring out from Japan's ancient past? Were they symbols of fertility and healing, abstract expressions of human hope, or depictions of something far more extraordinary? The answer, for now, remains hidden in silence, waiting beneath the soil of Japan and in the imagination of all who encounter them. From the enigmatic Dogu figurines of Japan, whose silent eyes peer at us from the depths of antiquity, we now turn our gaze westward, across continents and seas, to the rolling hills of Scotland. Here, beneath a shifting sky of mist and rain, lies a stone unlike any other. Vast, enigmatic, and etched with symbols that resist explanation, it is known as the Cochno stone, Discovered in 1887 on the outskirts of Llafli near Glasgow, the Cochno stone is one of the largest and most intricate examples of prehistoric rock art in Europe. Measuring an astonishing 43 feet by 26 feet, the stone's surface is covered with over 100 carved markings, spirals, circles, lines, and mysterious indentations that shimmer in the light after rainfall. To stand before it is to face a canvas not of pigment or brush, but of stone and chisel, an ancient message written across time itself. Archaeologists date the carvings to the Neolithic or Bronze Age, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 years ago. This places the Cochno stone alongside other megalithic creations of Europe, such as Stonehenge and the Great Passage tombs of Ireland. Yet unlike those monumental structures, the Cochno stone offers no towering architecture, no dramatic silhouette against the horizon. Instead, it speaks quietly, almost humbly, through a language of symbols etched into the earth. But what do these markings mean? And why were they carved with such care and persistence? Mainstream archaeology offers several interpretations. The cup and ring marks, small circular depressions surrounded by concentric rings, are found not only in Scotland but across Britain, Ireland, and even parts of continental Europe. Some scholars believe they were ritualistic, tied to fertility or the cycles of nature. Others suggest they may have marked territories, served as maps, or functioned as astronomical markers aligned with the movement of the sun, moon, and stars. The spirals, in particular, hint at deeper cosmological symbolism. Could they represent the cycles of life and death, the turning of the seasons, or journeys into otherworldly realms? Perhaps they were visual prayers carved into stone, enduring long after voices had faded into silence. Yet, the enigma deepens. For all the scholarly theories, no consensus exists. The symbols resist easy classification. Their sheer number, their precision, and their arrangement across the stone's surface raise as many questions as they answer. Were they meant to be read in sequence, like words in a sentence? Or were they a collection of sacred images, layered meaning upon meaning, generation after generation? Adding to the mystery is the fate of the stone itself. By the mid-20th century, local authorities, fearing vandalism and damage to the carvings, made the extraordinary decision to bury the Cochno stone beneath several feet of soil. For decades, it lay hidden, unseen, a buried memory beneath the Scottish earth. Only in recent years, through careful excavation and digital mapping, has its surface been revealed again, if only temporarily, to the eyes of researchers. But as with many archaeological enigmas, speculation soon reaches beyond the boundaries of traditional study. Some observers, noting the stone's intricate carvings, suggest it might once have served as a great astronomical chart, a map of the heavens preserved in stone. The spirals and circles, in this view, mirror constellations, solar paths, or lunar cycles, an ancient sky chart for a people whose lives were intimately tied to the rhythms of the cosmos. Others see the markings as something even more radical, records of otherworldly encounters. The concentric rings and spirals, they argue, resemble not natural or symbolic imagery, but depictions of flying discs or portals. To those who embrace this view, the Cochno stone is not simply prehistoric art, but testimony, etched in stone, of contact with forces beyond our world. And still others look closer to home, suggesting that the carvings were less about the heavens and more about the earth beneath our feet. The patterns may have been territorial markers, maps of rivers, hills, or settlements long since vanished. Perhaps they charted sacred landscapes, connecting people to their ancestors, to burial sites, or to places of ritual significance. The truth, as ever, remains elusive. What we do know is that the Cochno stone is not unique, though it is the grandest of its kind. Across Scotland and beyond, cup and ring marks appear on stones, cliffs, and monuments, scattered like a language whose grammar we no longer understand. To the people who carved them, these marks surely held meaning, perhaps vital, perhaps sacred. To us, they remain a puzzle, an echo of a lost world whose thoughts cannot be translated. Standing before the Cochno stone, one is struck not only by its scale, but by its silence. The stone says nothing, yet it speaks volumes. Its spirals and circles pull the eye inward, as if drawing the mind toward hidden truths. The rain collects in its carved depressions, turning the markings into shimmering mirrors of sky and earth. In those reflections, one begins to sense the power the stone must have held for those who carved it. But the question lingers: what were they trying to tell us? Were these spirals prayers, maps, or messages to the cosmos? Were they symbols of life and death, or records of things seen in the skies above? Or were they something else entirely, something we have yet to imagine? The Cochno stone lies in quiet obscurity once again, protected beneath its covering of earth, safe from weather and vandalism. Yet in its concealment, its mystery only grows. For every answer archaeology proposes, new questions emerge. Each spiral leads not to a conclusion, but to another layer of uncertainty. And so we are left with this, a vast canvas of stone etched thousands of years ago, waiting for meaning to be found. Was it an ancient map, a sacred text, or a message meant not for us, but for the stars themselves? The mystery of the Cochno stone endures, an unsolved riddle carved into the bedrock of Scotland, still whispering across the ages. From the carved spirals of the Cochno stone in Scotland, we journey now across continents, to the lands once cradled by the Tigris and Euphrates. Here, among the ruins and relics of ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, lies an object that defies simple explanation. Modest in appearance, yet charged with profound mystery, it is known as the Baghdad Battery. At first glance, it is an unassuming artifact, a clay jar, no taller than a hand, dating to around 200 BC. Within it, archaeologists discovered a copper cylinder, carefully fitted inside, and at the center, an iron rod sealed in place with bitumen. To the untrained eye, it seems nothing more than a container, perhaps once holding wine, oil, or some unknown liquid. But to others, the configuration hints at something startlingly familiar: the design of an ancient galvanic cell. When this object was unearthed in the 1930s, near Baghdad, scholars were puzzled. Could this really be an ancient battery? An electrical device created nearly 2,000 years before the science of electricity was formally understood. The very thought stretches the boundaries of what we believe about ancient technology. If filled with an acidic liquid, such as vinegar, lemon juice, or wine, the jar's metal components could, in theory, produce a small electric current. Demonstrations in modern laboratories have confirmed this. Replicas of the Baghdad Battery, when filled with such liquids, generate measurable voltage. Not enough to power machinery or light a bulb, but sufficient to deliver a mild shock, or to electroplate a thin layer of metal onto another surface. And so the question arises: was this the purpose of the device? Was electricity, long before its rediscovery in modern times, harnessed by the people of ancient Mesopotamia? Mainstream scholars remain cautious. Some suggest the jar may have been used simply for storage, its metal components accidental, its resemblance to a battery coincidental. Others believe it might have served in ritual or medicinal contexts, perhaps holding sacred scrolls or remedies, with no connection to electricity at all. Without clear evidence, these explanations lean toward the practical, seeking to place the artifact within the known patterns of ancient life. Yet speculation persists. If the Baghdad Battery was indeed a functional cell, what might it have been used for? Some propose electroplating, using electrical current to coat objects with thin layers of gold or silver. Ancient jewelry, after all, often displays remarkable craftsmanship, Could electricity have been a hidden tool in this artistry? Others suggest more esoteric uses. Perhaps the jars were part of healing rituals, where mild electrical shocks were thought to restore balance or vitality. In later centuries, electricity would indeed be explored as a form of therapy. Could Mesopotamian healers have stumbled upon the same principle? Still more speculative voices see in the Baghdad Battery a symbol of forgotten knowledge, technologies lost to time, fragments of a science once known and then buried beneath centuries of war, conquest, and decay. If a battery could exist in 200 BC, what else might have been possible? Did ancient peoples explore currents and forces far beyond what history credits to them? The discovery of multiple jars of similar design adds another layer of intrigue. Were these isolated curiosities or part of a larger system? Imagine, for a moment, rows of clay jars aligned, each producing a modest current, together forming a primitive power source. What might such energy have been used for in temples, workshops, or rituals? Was it symbolic, practical, or something in between? And yet, no definitive evidence ties the Baghdad Battery to such uses. No wires, no connected devices, no written records speak of electricity in ancient Mesopotamian texts. The silence of history leaves us with possibilities, not answers. The artifact sits, quiet and enigmatic, bridging two worlds: the concrete reality of clay, copper, and iron, and the boundless realm of human imagination. Was it a tool, a ritual object, or a coincidence that deceives the eye with its resemblance to modern technology? In its small frame, the Baghdad Battery carries an immense weight of mystery. It challenges the linear story of progress, the neat narrative that science was discovered in orderly steps from ancient times to the modern age. Instead, it whispers of detours, of lost knowledge, of experiments that may have flickered briefly before vanishing into obscurity. Standing before it in the museum today, one cannot help but wonder, was this little jar the spark of something extraordinary, a glimpse into an ancient science now forgotten? Or is it simply our modern minds projecting electricity onto an artifact that had no such purpose? The truth remains hidden, perhaps forever. But the Baghdad Battery, in its simplicity, continues to provoke questions that refuse easy answers. Could it be that ancient hands once harnessed the invisible force we now take for granted? Or are we merely seeing what we wish to see, patterns of our own making in the clay of the past? As with the spirals carved into Scotland's Cochno stone, the Baghdad Battery invites us into a space where fact and mystery overlap. It reminds us that the past is not always as distant as we imagine, nor as easily explained. Somewhere in the silence of Mesopotamia, in the ruins of temples and workshops long reduced to dust, the secret of this curious jar may still lie waiting. And so, the Baghdad Battery endures, an object both ordinary and extraordinary, a clay vessel that asks a question science cannot yet answer. What truly did the ancients know? From the deserts of Mesopotamia and the enigma of the Baghdad Battery, our journey carries us northwest, across seas and centuries, to the rolling hills of southern England. Here, etched into the green slopes of Oxfordshire, lies a figure that has puzzled scholars and stirred imaginations for more than 3,000 years. It is not hidden in ruins, nor buried beneath the earth, but carved boldly into the land itself, a colossal chalk figure known as the Uffington White Horse. At first sight, the creature seems otherworldly. Its body stretches more than 350 feet across the hillside, its sleek form outlined by deep trenches filled with crushed white chalk that gleams brilliantly against the green. Unlike the heavy, lifelike depictions of animals found in later centuries, this figure is abstract, almost modern in its simplicity. A long neck, slender limbs, and a sinuous body that flows like a symbol rather than a literal representation. From the valley below, it dominates the landscape, as if gazing eternally across the countryside. Dating the Uffington horse has long been a challenge. For centuries, many assumed it was of Saxon origin, perhaps carved around the 9th century AD to commemorate victories or local rulers. But scientific techniques, including radiocarbon dating of the soil and chalk, revealed a much older story. The figure likely dates to around 1000 BC, placing it firmly in the late Bronze Age or early Iron Age. This revelation transforms it from medieval artwork into something far more ancient, an enduring message from a time when written records were scarce and symbols carried the weight of meaning. But what exactly does it mean? Some historians believe the horse was a territorial marker, declaring ownership of the land to distant travelers. Its massive scale would make it visible for miles, a striking emblem cut into the natural world. Others suggest it was a religious or ceremonial image, connected to fertility rites or local deities associated with horses, animals that held immense symbolic power in Celtic and pre-Celtic societies. Horses were tied to war, to transport, to wealth and status. They were also linked to the sun and to cycles of death and rebirth. Could this great chalk figure have been a sacred offering, a prayer inscribed upon the earth? The horse's placement adds another layer of mystery. It lies near an ancient hill fort known as Uffington Castle, and not far from a ridgeway that was once a major prehistoric track across Britain. The nearby Dragon Hill, a natural mound, is steeped in legend, said to be the place where St. George slew the dragon. The entire landscape feels woven together with myth, history, and symbolism. Was the white horse part of this broader sacred geography, a landscape of ritual, story, and power? Intriguingly, the design of the figure is unlike most other chalk carvings found across England. Later chalk horses, such as those at Westbury or Churchill, are more naturalistic, depicting sturdy animals in solid form. The Uffington horse, by contrast, is almost abstract, its curving lines closer to symbols seen on ancient coins or artifacts than to depictions of living creatures. Some archaeologists have pointed out similarities between the horse and imagery of solar deities found in Celtic culture, suggesting it may not represent an earthly animal at all, but a divine or cosmic being. Speculation also drifts toward the idea of signaling. From high above, the figure is unmistakable. Could it have been a kind of beacon for those traveling across the land, or even for those watching from the skies? This suggestion often stirs more imaginative theories, connecting the horse to ideas of ancient star maps, sky gods, or contact with forces beyond human history. While such notions remain on the fringe, they persist, fueled by the sheer audacity of carving something so vast into the earth. Even more, from the deserts of Mesopotamia and the enigma of the Baghdad Battery, our journey carries us northwest, across seas and centuries, to the rolling hills of southern England. Here, etched into the green slopes of Oxfordshire, lies a figure that has puzzled scholars and stirred imaginations for more than 3,000 years. It is not hidden in ruins, nor buried beneath the earth, but carved boldly into the land itself, a colossal chalk figure known as the Uffington White Horse. At first sight, the creature seems otherworldly. Its body stretches more than 350 feet across the hillside, its sleek form outlined by deep trenches filled with crushed white chalk that gleams brilliantly against the green. Unlike the heavy, lifelike depictions of animals found in later centuries, this figure is abstract, almost modern in its simplicity. A long neck, slender limbs, and a sinuous body that flows. Standing before it today, the white horse still glows with its stark brilliance, unsoftened by time. It is a reminder that some mysteries are not buried in hidden chambers or lost beneath sands, but lie in plain sight, visible to all yet understood by none. And so we are left to wonder who first carved this immense figure into the hillside, and what message were they trying to leave behind? Was it a sign for their people, for their gods, or perhaps for those yet to come? The answer may be lost to the ages. But the Uffington White Horse, etched against the green hills of England, continues to ask its silent question, year after year, century after century, an enigma carved into the very bones of the land. From the windswept hills of southern England and the haunting figure of the Uffington White Horse, our path now turns south across seas and deserts to the heart of the Nile Valley. Here, beneath shifting sands and limestone ridges, archaeologists made a discovery that still challenges our understanding of the ancient world. Not a monument nor a tomb, but a skeleton, one whose age, condition, and very form raise profound questions about who walked these lands tens of thousands of years ago. This is the mystery of the Nazlet Khater skeleton. The site of Nazlet Khater lies near the village of Tahta in Upper Egypt. The land here is arid, marked by shallow depressions, rocky outcrops, and ancient quarry sites where prehistoric peoples once carved tools from stone. In 1980, during excavations in the area, researchers uncovered something extraordinary: the remains of a man buried deep in the sediment, his bones lying undisturbed for more than 35,000 years. He was not a pharaoh, not a nobleman wrapped in linens, but one of the oldest known modern humans ever found on the African continent. At first glance, his presence seemed straightforward: an early Homo sapiens, living and dying in the Nile Valley during the late Stone Age. But as scientists studied the skeleton more closely, anomalies began to emerge. The man, estimated to be between 20 and 30 years old at the time of his death, stood about 5 feet 6 inches tall. His bones revealed signs of heavy labor, particularly in the arms and shoulders, suggesting a life of intense physical exertion. Some researchers believe he may have been a quarry worker, shaping stone with tools still found scattered near his burial site. Yet it was his skull that drew the greatest attention. Unlike other human remains of similar age, the Nazlet Khater skeleton displayed a curious mixture of traits. While much of his anatomy was consistent with modern humans, certain features of the skull, its elongated shape, robust structure, and heavy brow ridges, appeared more archaic, echoing characteristics seen in much older hominid species. Was this man a direct ancestor of modern Egyptians, or did he belong to a population that blended with others, a lineage now lost to time? This question strikes at the heart of the mystery. Around 35,000 BC, Homo sapiens were spreading across Africa, the Middle East, and into Europe. But the Nazlet Khater remains do not fit neatly into the established timeline of human evolution. Some anthropologists suggest he may represent a remnant of an older population that survived alongside more modern humans. Others propose that the unusual features were simply regional variations, evidence of the great diversity that once existed within early human groups. Yet the intrigue does not end there. Nearby, archaeologists discovered tools and artifacts, finely crafted stone implements that hint at both skill and cultural complexity. These objects suggest that the Nazlet Khater man was part of a community with knowledge of quarrying and craftsmanship, perhaps even engaged in organized labor thousands of years before the rise of Egyptian civilization. Could it be that the roots of Egypt's monumental stonework reach back further than we ever imagined, into a time when small groups of hunter-gatherers experimented with techniques later perfected by pharaonic builders? Some researchers entertain even broader possibilities. The unusual blend of features in the Nazlet Khater skeleton has led a few to speculate about interbreeding with other hominid species. Could this man have carried traces of Neanderthal ancestry, or perhaps genetic heritage from another, as yet unidentified group? Such questions remain difficult to answer, though advances in DNA analysis may one day shed new light on the enigma. Others step further into speculation, asking whether the skeleton points to an unknown chapter of human history altogether. Could there have been populations in the Nile Valley whose stories have been erased by time, their cultures lost beneath layers of desert sand? Might the Nazlet Cotter Man represent not just an individual life, but a doorway into a forgotten world? And then there is the burial itself. The position of the skeleton suggests intentional interment, his body carefully placed in the earth, accompanied by tools. This act implies ritual or meaning, a recognition of life and death beyond mere survival. What beliefs guided these ancient people? Did they imagine an afterlife long before the pyramids and tombs of pharaohs? Or was this a simpler gesture of respect for the dead, a tradition carried forward through countless generations? As we peer deeper into the mystery, we are reminded that Egypt's story did not begin with dynasties, temples, or monumental stone. It began with people, individuals whose lives, though distant, were marked by labor, ritual, and identity. The Nazlet Cotter skeleton is a rare and fragile bridge to that world, offering more questions than answers. Today, his bones rest in careful preservation, studied and restudied by those seeking to piece together humanity's past. And yet, despite decades of research, the man of Nazlet Cotter remains elusive. Who was he? A quarry worker whose community laid the foundations for future civilizations? A member of a forgotten lineage that once thrived in the Nile Valley? Or a solitary figure, preserved by chance, carrying within his bones secrets we may never fully grasp? The sands of Egypt hold many mysteries, but few are as intimate as this one. A single human life, suspended between the ancient and the modern, between what we know and what we can only imagine. And so, we are left with a lingering question. In the silent bones of Nazlet Cotter, do we glimpse a fragment of our shared human story, or the shadow of something we have yet to understand? From the shifting sands of Egypt and the enigma of the Nazlet Cotter skeleton, our journey now takes us across oceans and continents, to the high, windswept plateaus of the Bolivian Andes. Here, in one of the most isolated and forbidding landscapes on Earth, another mystery lies preserved in silence. It is not carved into stone, nor hidden beneath temple walls, but bound in the fragile, withered remains of human beings, mummies whose presence defies both time and explanation. This is the mystery of the Sajama mummies. At nearly 21,000 feet, Mount Sajama towers above the Bolivian Altiplano like a silent sentinel, its snow-covered peak piercing the thin Andean air. Around its base stretch barren plains, where the wind sweeps endlessly across a land that seems frozen between earth and sky. The climate here is brutal, cold, dry, and unyielding. And yet, it is precisely these conditions that have safeguarded one of archaeology's most haunting discoveries: naturally preserved mummies, some believed to be thousands of years old. The Sajama region is dotted with ancient stone towers known as chulpas. These funerary structures, constructed by pre-Columbian cultures, rise like weathered monuments to forgotten ancestors. Within them, explorers and archaeologists have uncovered human remains so well preserved that strands of hair, fragments of clothing, and even facial features have survived the passage of centuries. But the story of the Sajama mummies is not as straightforward as it first appears. While many of the remains clearly belong to the Aymara and other indigenous groups who practiced ritual burials in the Andes, certain discoveries have puzzled researchers. Some bodies appear to predate known cultures of the region, their antiquity stretching deep into an uncertain past. Others bear unusual characteristics: elongated skulls, strange burial positions, or artifacts that do not align neatly with established traditions. Were these simply regional variations of funerary practices, or do they point towards something more enigmatic? The environment itself adds to the intrigue. The high-altitude climate of Sajama, with its freezing nights and dry air, acts as a natural preservative, halting the decay of flesh and bone. Unlike the mummies of Egypt, embalmed through deliberate human effort, many of the Sajama mummies seem to have been preserved by the mountain itself, as if the land chose to guard their memory. This raises a question. Were these burials intentional acts of preservation, or did ancient people merely take advantage of a landscape that naturally defied time? Local traditions weave further layers into the mystery. Among indigenous communities, the mummies are often seen not as relics of a distant past, but as powerful ancestral presences. Some villagers speak of spirits connected to the remains, protectors of the land or guardians of hidden knowledge. There are stories of travelers who disturbed the mummies and were later struck by misfortune, as if the ancestors demanded respect long after death. Archaeologists approach these accounts cautiously, recognizing them as expressions of cultural memory. Yet they also acknowledge that such beliefs may preserve kernels of historical truth, echoes of ancient rituals, myths, or warnings passed down through generations. And then there are the more speculative theories. Some researchers, noting the occasional discovery of elongated skulls among Andean mummies, have questioned whether these features were the result of deliberate cranial deformation, a known practice among several pre-Columbian cultures, or evidence of something less understood. Could these skulls suggest cultural connections stretching across vast distances, linking the peoples of the Andes with other ancient civilizations that practiced similar traditions? Others wonder about the possibility of migrations or lost cultures that once traversed the high Andean plains. The Altiplano, though harsh, is scattered with traces of ancient roads, geoglyphs, and ceremonial sites. Could the Sajama mummies be the remains of a people whose story has been almost entirely erased from history? More fringe perspectives venture even further. Some point to the remote, inhospitable nature of the region and ask whether the mummies' preservation hides secrets about human origins or unexplained influences in pre-Columbian South America. Were the Sajama mummies witnesses to forgotten chapters of civilization, or something stranger still? Mainstream archaeology emphasizes caution. Most scholars agree that the Sajama mummies are part of the long, complex history of Andean cultures, a testament to their resilience and their rituals of honoring the dead. Yet the unanswered questions remain. Why were some bodies placed in towers while others were left in caves or open ground? Why do certain remains show variations that do not fit neatly into known cultural frameworks? And why does the region hold such a concentration of preserved bodies, more than in many other parts of the Andes? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not the mummies themselves, but what they represent. They stand as a bridge between the living and the dead, between memory and oblivion. Their faces, weathered yet still human, remind us that these were individuals who once walked the Altiplano, endured its hardships, and lived within its mysteries. And yet, beyond their preserved skin and bones, their voices remain silent. Standing in the shadow of Mount Sajama, one cannot help but feel the weight of their presence. The thin air carries a sense of stillness, as if time itself has paused to guard these fragile figures. Were they ancestors waiting to be remembered? Symbols of rituals we have yet to fully decode? Or simply people caught between life and death in a land that refuses to let go of its dead? The Sajama mummies whisper of a past that is both familiar and alien. Their preservation is not just a scientific phenomenon, but a reminder that the boundary between history and mystery is often fragile. And so we are left to wonder, what secrets lie entombed in the silent towers of Sajama? And how many more stories of forgotten lives still wait, hidden beneath the endless Andean sky? From the windswept heights of the Bolivian Andes, where the Sajama mummies rest in their stone towers, our path now leads us across oceans and centuries into the green heart of Ireland. Here, amid rolling hills and valleys heavy with mist, lies another mystery etched into the land, an ancient complex of tombs and monuments whose purpose remains as elusive as the voices of those who built them. This is the story of the Loughcrew Cairns. The site rests on a cluster of hills in County Meath, their summits rising gently above a patchwork of fields and woodlands. From a distance, the cairns appear as grass-covered mounds, blending seamlessly with the natural contours of the landscape. But step closer, and the illusion dissolves. These are not simple hills. They are human-made structures of immense age, stone chambers carefully constructed and aligned, dating back some 5,000 years to around 3500 BC. Archaeologists classify the Loughcrew Cairns as passage tombs, part of the great Neolithic tradition that also gave rise to Newgrange and Noath. Within each mound lies a narrow, stone-lined passage leading to a central chamber, often surrounded by subsidiary recesses. The stones themselves are carved with mysterious symbols, spirals, lozenges, sunbursts, and patterns whose meaning has never been fully understood. It is thought that these cairns served as burial sites, monuments of ritual and remembrance. Fragments of human bone, pottery, and tools discovered within suggest that the dead were interred here, perhaps accompanied by offerings. Yet the precision with which many of the cairns are aligned, especially Cairn T, the most famous of the group, introduces another layer of mystery. Twice a year, at the spring and autumn equinoxes, the rising sun sends its first light down the passage of Cairn T, illuminating the carvings on its inner chamber walls. This alignment is no accident. It reveals a sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, a deliberate fusion of stone and sky. The builders of Loughcrew were not merely burying their dead, they were marking the rhythm of the heavens, binding human memory to the turning of the seasons. But what precisely did this mean to them? One interpretation is that these alignments reflect a belief in cyclical rebirth, the sun returning year after year, as the spirits of the dead might also return in some form. Another suggests that the cairns functioned as ceremonial calendars, guiding agricultural life and ritual observance. Still others propose that the carvings and orientations were intended to encode knowledge, cosmological, spiritual, or even practical, preserved in stone across generations. Yet the Loughcrew Cairns refuse to yield all their secrets. The carvings themselves, while striking, remain indecipherable. Are they symbolic maps of the stars, abstract representations of spiritual journeys, or simply the artistic expressions of a people seeking to inscribe their presence upon the land? Local legend tells a different story. According to folklore, the cairns were built by a giantess who leapt across the hills carrying stones in her apron, dropping them where they now stand. Other tales speak of fairy mounds, portals to another world where time runs differently and the boundaries between life and death are thin. Such myths, while not historical in a modern sense, reflect the enduring sense of awe the cairns inspire, a sense that they belong to a realm beyond ordinary human endeavor. Some researchers have noticed intriguing parallels between the symbols at Loughcrew and those found at other megalithic sites, not only in Ireland but across Europe. Could this suggest a shared symbolic language, a network of ideas stretching across the Neolithic world? If so, who carried this knowledge, and how far did it travel? Others take the speculation further still. The sheer antiquity of the cairns, constructed long before the pyramids of Egypt, has fueled theories of lost civilizations or of wisdom handed down from cultures now vanished from history. Were the builders of Lofcru inheritors of forgotten knowledge passed through oral tradition from a time before recorded memory? Or were they independent visionaries, drawing meaning from the land and sky in ways we can scarcely reconstruct today? There are even those who ask whether the alignments and carvings encode something more, mathematical knowledge perhaps, or records of celestial events long forgotten. If the builders could track the equinoxes with such precision, might they also have recorded eclipses, planetary movements, or cosmic cycles that extended beyond the span of human lifetimes? Skeptics caution against overinterpretation, reminding us that we must not project modern concepts onto ancient monuments. Yet even within careful scholarship, there remains an acknowledgement. These were no ordinary structures. Their builders, though without metal tools or written language, created monuments that continue to inspire awe and defy complete understanding. Walking among the cairns today, the air carries a silence broken only by wind and the distant call of birds. Step into the shadowed passage of Cairn T, and you are enveloped by stone walls etched with patterns older than history itself. When the equinox sun pierces the darkness and lights the chamber, the carvings seem almost to come alive, as if whispering a language whose meaning has been lost, but whose power endures. What drove Neolithic builders to haul these stones, to carve these symbols, to align their tombs with the sky? Was it reverence for the dead, an attempt to bridge the human and the cosmic, or a message intended for the distant future? The Lofcru cairns stand as reminders that the past is never fully silent. Even when stripped of context, even when their builders are nameless, these monuments continue to speak, through light, through stone, and through mystery. And so we are left to wonder, what truths lie encoded in the carvings of Lofcru, and what other secrets still slumber beneath the green hills of Ireland, waiting for the day they too are revealed to the light? From the misty hills of Ireland, where the Lofcru cairns guard their secrets in silence, our journey turns southward, into the sun-soaked landscapes of Portugal. Here, among rolling plains dotted with cork oaks and olive trees, stands another monument of stone and mystery, one of the largest and most impressive megalithic tombs in all of Europe. This is the Anta de Zambujeiro. Hidden near Evora, in the Alentejo region, the dolmen lies in quiet seclusion, its massive granite slabs weathered by time yet still commanding the landscape. Approaching it, the first impression is sheer scale. The largest of its stones weighs more than 20 tons, and the central chamber rises nearly 8 meters high, so vast that stepping inside feels less like entering a tomb and more like entering a temple. Archaeologists date its construction to around 4000 to 3500 BC, placing it firmly within the Neolithic period. It is part of the wider Iberian megalithic tradition, a culture that left behind hundreds of dolmens, menhirs, and stone circles across Portugal and Spain. Yet among these, Anta de Zambujeiro stands apart, not just for its size, but for the questions it raises. What kind of society could mobilize the resources, labor, and knowledge to erect such a monument? How did Neolithic builders move and raise stones of such immense weight without the aid of metal tools, wheels, or beasts of burden? And perhaps most intriguingly, why? The mainstream view is that Anta de Zambujeiro was a collective burial site. Excavations have uncovered human remains, along with artifacts such as pottery, stone tools, and decorative items, all suggesting ritual use. The passage that once connected the chamber to the outside world, now collapsed, would have served as a ceremonial pathway, guiding mourners and participants into the heart of the monument. But beyond the practical explanations, the Anta invites deeper speculation. The sheer scale of the chamber, far larger than required for simple burials, suggests it may have been more than a tomb. Was it also a gathering place, a site of ritual where life and death intersected? Did it serve as a sanctuary, a stage upon which ancient ceremonies of renewal were performed. The stones themselves add to the mystery. Some show traces of engravings, circles, lines, and geometric motifs faintly visible beneath centuries of erosion. Their meaning, like the carvings at Loughcrew or Newgrange, remains uncertain. Are they mere decoration or symbolic records of beliefs, myths, or even celestial phenomena? In recent decades, scholars have considered the astronomical dimensions of Iberian megaliths. Many dolmens and stone circles in Portugal appear aligned with the movements of the sun or moon. Could the Anta de Zambujeiro also have been positioned with cosmic intent, perhaps marking solstices, equinoxes, or other significant celestial events? If so, the monument becomes more than a burial place. It becomes a bridge between earth and sky, between the rhythms of human life and the eternal cycles of the cosmos. And then there are the more speculative theories. Some have suggested that structures like Anta de Zambujeiro reflect a memory of lost civilizations, echoes of a knowledge that predates recorded history. Could its builders have inherited techniques and traditions from an earlier age, perhaps from communities displaced by climate shifts at the end of the last ice age? Others imagine the dolmens as power centers, designed not only for ritual, but for harnessing subtle energies of the earth, concepts that linger in folklore but remain outside mainstream archaeology. Local legends, too, wrap the Anta in mystery. Like many megalithic sites, it is associated with stories of enchanted beings, of fairies or spirits who guard its stones. Some villagers once believed it unsafe to disturb the monument, fearing misfortune would follow. Such tales, while not historical evidence, remind us that these monuments were never seen as ordinary constructions. They were, and remain, places where the human and the otherworldly seem to meet. Walking among the massive stones today, one cannot help but feel a sense of scale that goes beyond the physical. The air is heavy, the silence profound. To step inside the chamber is to enter a space set apart from the ordinary world, a place where generations once gathered in reverence and awe. Even in ruin, the Anta retains its power, its towering stones pressing a presence upon the visitor, a reminder of lives lived and mysteries unspoken. What purpose did this monument truly serve? Was it primarily a tomb, housing the bones of the dead and the artifacts of their passage? Was it a ceremonial calendar, aligning human ritual with celestial motion? Or was it something more, an expression of beliefs we can scarcely reconstruct, a language of stone whose grammar and meaning are now beyond reach? The Anta de Zambujeiro stands as both an achievement and a riddle. It testifies to the ingenuity and determination of its builders, yet it also speaks to the vast gulf that separates our understanding from theirs. And so the questions remain. What compelled those early communities to raise stones so large, to carve symbols so enigmatic, to shape spaces so monumental? Were they seeking to honor their dead, to commune with their gods, or to speak to the stars? The answers lie somewhere between archaeology and imagination, between the record of excavation and the silence of stone. And as the Portuguese sun sets over the quiet plains of Alentejo, the Anta of Zambujeiro continues to keep its secrets, whispering of a world we know only in fragments, inviting us to wonder what truths still rest beneath its ancient shadow. From the ancient stones of Europe, where monuments of granite and mystery still stand, our journey now drifts eastward, across seas and centuries, to the rugged coastlines of Japan. Here, in the early 19th century, a strange story was recorded. A story that blends folklore with eyewitness testimony, myth with the possibility of history. It is the legend of the Utsuro Bune, the hollow ship. Imagine the year 1803, on the eastern shores of Japan, in what is now Ibaraki Prefecture. Fishermen stood along the windswept beaches, their eyes drawn to an unfamiliar shape drifting on the waves, It was not a fishing boat, nor the merchant vessels they sometimes saw offshore. This craft was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Accounts describe it as circular or tub-shaped, about 3 to 4 meters high and 5 meters wide, with a dome-like roof. Its lower half appeared to be made of metal, possibly iron or copper, while its upper half was fashioned from wood, coated in a substance that some described as a kind of resin. Small windows, made, it was said, of crystal or glass, were sealed tightly with resin to prevent water from entering. The entire vessel seemed designed for isolation, as though it had been built not for travel across the seas, but for containment. Inside, the fishermen claimed, was a young woman. She was described as beautiful, with pale skin, reddish hair, and strange clothing unknown to the villagers. In her hands, she clutched a small box, which she guarded with desperate care, never allowing anyone to touch or even look inside. When questioned, she spoke in a language the locals could not understand. Nothing in her manner or her belongings offered clues to her origins. What was this hollow ship, and who was the woman within it? The event is recorded in several Edo period texts, including the Toen Shosetsu and the Ume no Chiri. These writings, part historical account and part storytelling tradition, describe the encounter with remarkable detail. While Japanese folklore often features tales of mysterious visitors or supernatural beings from the sea, the Utsuro Bune story is notable for its consistency across multiple sources. Some historians view the tale as allegory, a symbolic story that reflected the anxieties of early 19th century Japan, a country then under the Tokugawa shogunate's strict policy of isolation. Foreign contact was limited and tightly controlled. Strange vessels appearing on Japan's shores might have represented both a real fear and a real possibility. Indeed, foreign ships were sighted from time to time, often leading to speculation, tension, or even conflict. Could the Utsurobune have been nothing more than a stranded foreign vessel, its passenger a castaway from a distant land? Some scholars suggest that the woman may have come from Russia, given the reddish hair and foreign clothing. Others point to possible origins in Europe or even Southeast Asia. The box she carried might have held something of personal or religious significance, perhaps the remains of a loved one or a sacred object tied to her culture. Yet the details resist simple explanation. Why would such a vessel, with its unusual materials and sealed windows, have been built in that precise form? Why do multiple accounts emphasize its dome-like construction, so different from the ships and boats familiar to the Japanese of that era? The story's more speculative interpretations emerge from these gaps. Some modern writers have noted the similarities between the Utsuro Bune and depictions of flying saucers in the 20th century. A round, metallic craft carrying a mysterious figure who communicates in an unknown language. Could this legend be an early cultural echo of what would later be described as UFO encounters? Others suggest the Utsuro Bune might represent an ancient technology, one that slipped into myth after drifting from elsewhere. Was it possible that the craft had connections to forgotten experiments in navigation or engineering, lost to history but preserved in folklore? Or could it have been something more elusive? An attempt by Edo period observers to describe an object for which they had no frame of reference. And then there is the woman herself. Her guarded box has inspired endless speculation. Was it a container of relics, a device, or something altogether stranger? Why her desperate insistence that no one look inside? Without knowing her language, without knowing her culture, the meaning remains hidden. Local villagers, according to the records, eventually chose to return both the woman and her vessel to the sea, pushing it back into the currents from which it came. What became of her, no one knows. Did she perish in the waves? Did she drift to another shore, where her story may have been told in different words, in a different tongue? Or was she never of this world to begin with? Even the written accounts leave much unanswered. Were they careful records of an actual event? Were they embellishments of rumors, shaped into narrative form? Or were they allegorical stories that grew more detailed as they were retold? The documents exist, but their meaning is uncertain. The Utsuro-bune legend occupies a space between history and myth, between fact and imagination. It reflects the anxieties of a nation on the brink of contact with a wider world, yet it also resonates with mysteries that feel timeless. The strange vessel, the unknown traveler, the object too precious to reveal. And so, we are left with questions. Was the Utsuro-bune a real vessel, built by human hands in some faraway land, its story preserved as folklore? Or was it something more elusive, an encounter with the inexplicable, retold in the only language and imagery available to the people of the time? As the waves of the Pacific continue to crash against the shores of Japan, the mystery endures, an unsolved tale of the sea, inviting us to wonder what other legends and what other truths may still lie hidden in the depths. From the mist-shrouded coastlines of Japan and the drifting tail of the Utsuro-bune, our path now winds inland, across continents and centuries, to the rolling plains of Transylvania in modern-day Romania. Here, in the quiet village of Tartaria, an archaeological discovery was made in 1961 that continues to puzzle historians, linguists, and researchers alike. It was a discovery so small it could fit in the palm of a hand, yet so profound it has unsettled our understanding of the origins of writing and human expression. In a shallow grave, buried alongside the remains of a woman believed to be a shaman or priestess, archaeologists unearthed 3 small clay tablets, often referred to as the Tartaria amulets or Tartaria tablets. Rough, fragile, and baked hard, their surfaces bore incised markings. To the untrained eye, these scratches might appear simple, even accidental. But on closer examination, they revealed symbols arranged with purpose and pattern. Some resembled pictographs, stylized representations of animals or tools. Others suggested abstract signs, the kind of repetitive forms that hint at structured communication. At first glance, these may appear to be no more than ritual tokens, objects placed with the deceased as part of a funerary rite. But the dating of the burial site revealed something extraordinary. The tablets are believed to be at least 7,000 years old, dating to around 5300 BC. That would make them older than the earliest known Sumerian cuneiform and even older than the hieroglyphic traditions of ancient Egypt. If these markings indeed represent a form of writing, then the Tartaria amulet could represent the oldest written text ever created by human hands. But is it truly writing? Mainstream archaeology approaches the question with caution. Some scholars suggest that the symbols are not a script in the true sense, but proto-writing, symbolic marks used for religious or ritual purposes, perhaps to record offerings, calendar cycles, or shamanic practices. In this view, the tablets are not evidence of a full language system, but rather of symbolic thought, a step on the long path toward true written communication. Yet, even within this cautious framework, the implications remain staggering. To find such complexity in Neolithic Europe suggests that symbolic systems were far more widespread than previously imagined. It challenges the narrative that the so-called cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia was the sole birthplace of writing. Could it be that human expression developed in multiple places independently, rising like parallel sparks of innovation across the ancient world? The Tartaria tablets also connect to a broader archaeological puzzle. Across southeastern Europe, in the region once home to the Vinca culture, thousands of artifacts have been uncovered bearing similar incised markings. Pottery shards, figurines, and tools carry patterns of signs that echo those found in Tartaria. Archaeologists refer to this collection of symbols as the Vinca script, or the Vinca signs. Some argue it is a writing system in its infancy. Others maintain it is decorative or ritualistic without linguistic content. If these markings were simply decorative, why would they repeat in such consistent patterns? Why would they appear across so many sites, from Serbia to Romania, spread across centuries of use? Could they represent a shared symbolic system, understood by a network of communities that stretched across the Balkans long before the rise of Mesopotamia? The amulet itself deepens the intrigue. Its small, portable form suggests it was meant to be carried, perhaps worn, perhaps kept as a sacred object. Some researchers argue it may have functioned as a talisman, carrying not just symbolic power but practical meaning for its owner. Others note the burial context, the association with a shamanic figure, as evidence that the tablets may have been tied to ritual practices, secrets too important to entrust to memory alone. And then there are the more speculative voices. A few researchers have drawn bold connections between the Tartaria amulet and later writing systems, arguing that the symbols show startling similarities to Sumerian signs. Could there have been cultural contact between the Neolithic Balkans and Mesopotamia, long before established trade routes? Was there an exchange of ideas that rippled outward, seeding the birth of writing in different lands? Others take the mystery even further. If writing existed in Europe as early as 5300 BC, why is there so little continuity leading into the later Bronze Age civilizations of the region? Could it be that an early, sophisticated culture arose here and then vanished, its knowledge lost, its traditions buried under layers of time? The idea of a forgotten European civilization is enticing, but it raises as many questions as it answers. Skeptics, however, urge restraint. They remind us that radiocarbon dating methods used in the early 1960s were not always precise, and the tablets themselves were fired in a way that complicates dating. Some argue the symbols are no more than accidental scratches or simple tally marks, nothing more significant than the doodles of a potter. The debate continues, with new analyses adding layers of complexity, but rarely resolution. And yet, the allure of the Tartaria amulet persists. It embodies the tension between what we know and what we suspect, between the material evidence in our hands and the mysteries that whisper just beyond it. If these are the earliest writings, what message were they meant to preserve? If they are not writing, then what symbolic weight compelled their creation? The tablets sit today as quiet witnesses in a museum collection, their meaning still locked away. They remind us that history is not a single line of progress, but a tapestry of attempts, failures, and forgotten innovations. And they force us to ask, how much of humanity's earliest expressions, its first words, its first ideas, remain buried beneath the soil, waiting to be uncovered? From the rolling plains of Romania and the enigmatic Tartaria tablets, our path now takes us far across the globe, deep into the southern hemisphere to the wild and untamed landscapes of New Zealand's North Island. Here, near the edge of the Kaimanawa Forest Park, an unusual stone formation lies hidden in plain sight. At first glance, it seems to blend naturally into the earth, a quiet structure half swallowed by moss, ferns, and the roots of towering trees. But to those who pause and look closer, its form raises a question. Is this the work of nature, or of ancient human hands? The so-called Kaimanawa Wall is made of massive stone blocks stacked in neat horizontal rows, with clean, sharp edges and near-perfect joins. The precision is striking. The blocks align with each other in a manner that seems deliberate, as if once part of a larger structure now lost to time. Each stone, some as large as a car, appears to fit seamlessly into the next, without mortar, as though carefully carved and placed. Standing before it, one is reminded of the monumental stoneworks of South America, particularly the Cyclopean walls of Peru, where ancient builders fitted immense blocks with uncanny accuracy. And yet, this mysterious wall is not found among the ruins of an established civilization. It stands instead in a region thought to have been uninhabited by humans until the arrival of the Maori people less than 1,000 years ago. Mainstream archaeology maintains that no culture in New Zealand's past constructed megalithic stone monuments of this kind. If that is true, then how can such a structure exist here, tucked away in the forest? The debate began in earnest in the early 1990s, when the site gained public attention. Photographs of the Kaimanawa Wall circulated in newspapers and magazines, fueling speculation. Some observers pointed out that the wall's stones resembled man-made blocks, squared and aligned with a precision that seemed beyond the work of mere geological chance. Could this be evidence of an unknown prehistoric culture in New Zealand? One that left no other trace except this enigmatic wall? Geologists, however, quickly offered a natural explanation. They argued that the wall is nothing more than an outcrop of ignimbrite, a type of volcanic rock formed from compacted ash flows. Over time, ignimbrite naturally fractures into rectangular shapes, creating patterns that resemble masonry. According to this view, the neat joints and block-like appearance are illusions of nature, a geological trick rather than the handiwork of forgotten builders. Yet the matter is far from settled. Those who have visited the wall often remark that its blocks appear too uniform, too intentionally arranged, to be dismissed as coincidence. Some claim the stones even bear tool marks, subtle grooves suggesting that they were shaped or cut. Others note that the steps formed by the blocks rise at regular intervals as though designed for human use. If this is merely natural geology, why does it so closely mimic construction? The Maori themselves add another layer to the mystery. Traditional Maori oral histories speak of earlier peoples inhabiting New Zealand before their arrival. Mysterious groups, sometimes referred to as the Waitaha or the Patupayarehe. These stories tell of pale-skinned or spirit-like beings who lived in forests and mountains, building and dwelling in places that predate Maori settlement. While many historians interpret these tales as myth, others wonder if they preserve distant echoes of forgotten cultures. Could the Kaimanawa Wall be a remnant of such a people? Speculative theories extend further still. Some have drawn comparisons between the wall and megalithic traditions elsewhere in the world. The precision of the blocks has led to suggestions of a global connection, perhaps evidence that ancient civilizations were more widespread and more advanced than we currently understand. Fringe researchers even propose that the wall could date back tens of thousands of years, to an era when New Zealand might have been home to a lost culture, now erased by time and tectonic upheaval. Skeptics counter these ideas firmly. They emphasize that no artifacts, tools, or cultural remains have been found near the wall to suggest human construction. Without such evidence, the notion of a prehistoric builder remains speculative at best. To them, the Kaimanawa Wall stands as an example of how natural formations can inspire human imagination, reminding us of the fine line between geology and archaeology. And yet imagination is precisely what keeps the mystery alive. For as one stands before the moss-covered blocks, it is difficult not to feel a sense of deliberate design. The forest is quiet, broken only by the call of birds and the whisper of wind through the leaves. The stones themselves seem to hold their silence, as if unwilling to reveal whether they are the product of nature's hidden artistry or the legacy of a culture long forgotten. What makes the Kaimanawa Wall so compelling is not just the debate over its origin, but the possibility it represents. If natural, it challenges us to recognize the power of geology to shape landscapes in ways that mimic human craft. If artificial, it hints at an entire chapter of history missing from the record, a chapter that might rewrite our understanding of New Zealand's past. Could the truth lie somewhere between the two? Could nature have created the foundation, later modified or interpreted by early peoples whose memory lingers only in oral traditions? Or might there be other such structures, hidden deep within the forests and mountains, waiting to be uncovered? The Kaimanawa Wall remains, its story unfinished, its mystery unresolved. A silent reminder that the Earth still holds secrets beyond our grasp. And as we move forward in our search for answers, we are left to wonder, is this simply the artistry of stone, or the whisper of a civilization lost to time? From the silent forests of New Zealand, where the Kaimanawa Wall raises questions of forgotten builders, we now travel to the far north of Scotland, to the windswept Orkney Islands. Here, amid rugged cliffs and sweeping seas, lies a landscape dotted with ancient monuments, stone circles, burial mounds, and settlements that speak of a culture both mysterious and enduring. Yet hidden among these treasures is a site less known, but no less enigmatic: the so-called Cochno tombs. The name itself is something of a puzzle. Unlike the great standing stones of Stennis or the chambered cairn of Maisho, the Cochno site does not rise above the land in monumental form. Instead, it lies low, carved into the very earth. Vast slabs of rock bear intricate patterns of spirals, circles, and cup marks etched with extraordinary precision into their hard surfaces. On damp days, when the Orkney skies hang heavy with mist and rain, water gathers in these hollows, reflecting dim light so that the carvings seem almost alive, rippling, glowing, whispering of meanings we cannot quite grasp. Archaeologists date these carvings to the Neolithic period, around 3000 BC, placing them among the oldest surviving artworks in Europe. Known as cup and ring marks, these symbols are not unique to Orkney. Similar patterns can be found across Britain, Ireland, and even as far afield as Spain, Scandinavia, and the Caucasus. They seem to form part of a widespread tradition, a symbolic language shared across great distances and cultures. But what they signify remains one of archaeology's most persistent mysteries. Were they maps, cosmic diagrams charting the stars, or earthly charts marking rivers, settlements, and pathways? Were they spiritual symbols, representing portals, cycles of life and death, or the movements of the sun and moon? Or were they something more practical, perhaps boundary markers or records of ownership? The absence of any written explanation leaves us guessing, our interpretations shaped as much by imagination as by evidence. The Cochno carvings stand out because of their scale and intricacy. Some stones are covered with dozens of symbols, arranged in what seems to be deliberate order. Spirals radiate outward like ripples on water, intersecting with circles and lines that may once have guided ritual or storytelling. To walk among them is to step into a world where meaning is encoded in pattern, where every groove carved into the rock was intentional. Yet intentional for what? Mainstream archaeology offers theories, but no certainty. Some scholars argue that the carvings represent celestial alignments, noting that certain spirals may correspond to the movements of the sun at solstices or equinoxes. Others suggest that the patterns mirror trance-like visions experienced during rituals, symbolic representations of altered states of consciousness. Still others propose a link to burial practices, with the carvings marking sacred ground or guiding the spirits of the dead. And then there are the more speculative ideas. Fringe researchers have drawn connections between the Cochno symbols and petroglyphs found thousands of miles away, in North America, in the Mediterranean, and beyond. Could there have been an ancient network of communication? A shared symbolic code stretching across continents? If so, what does that suggest about the mobility, or even the technological sophistication, of Neolithic peoples? The mystery deepens when one considers the durability of the carvings themselves. Why go to such lengths to etch hard stone when softer materials, wood, earth, even bone, could have sufficed for ritual or symbolic use? The effort suggests permanence, a desire to transmit meaning across generations. But to whom were these messages addressed? To the living communities of the time? To the spirits of the ancestors? Or perhaps to a future humanity, us, who would stumble upon them millennia later, struggling still to understand? Local tradition adds another layer. Stories told in Orkney speak of stones with magical properties, of markings left by giants or supernatural beings. These legends, though dismissed by scholars as folklore, remind us that the symbols have always carried weight, always provoked wonder. Even in ancient times, their meaning may not have been fully understood, perhaps intentionally so, belonging only to select initiates or priestly groups. In recent decades, the carvings have been studied with new technologies. Photogrammetry, 3D scanning, and digital modeling allow researchers to capture every detail, preserving the patterns for analysis. Yet technology, for all its precision, has not solved the riddle. It has only revealed the depth of the carvings, the skill of their makers, and the complexity of their designs. The why remains unanswered. Standing at the site, battered by salt winds from the sea, one cannot help but feel the weight of time pressing close. The symbols seem both familiar and alien, as if they speak a language just beyond our reach. They remind us of how much has been lost, how many chapters of human history lie buried in silence. And so the question lingers: were the Cochno tombs of Orkney a sacred script, a map of the heavens, or the visions of an ancient mind reaching for meaning in the patterns of the world? Or could they represent something we have not yet imagined, a message not for their time, but for ours? The stones wait in their silence, their carvings as sharp and haunting as the day they were made. The truth remains locked within their spirals, and perhaps it always will.